Jumpmaster Press presents The Fairy Fiddle by Philip Ligon. Read by Rick McVey. Printing and production copyright 2023 by Jumpmaster Press. A man left his home and all that he knew to pursue his dream and a life renewed. He took to the road with fiddle in hand to play his music across the land. Taken under the wing of an old bard, he learned the trade of well-being and safeguards. Signs of danger and songs of dire warnings best be heeded in days of despairing. A dreamer dreams of songs well played, of audiences enthralled, of thousands of accolades.
And take your pathetic fiddle with you.
Harry reached out in futility from where he sat on the ground as his instrument sailed over his head. He clutched at his chest when it hit the rocky, dirt-strewn road. The neck of the instrument snapped. 2 strings also broke, their lonely and final twangs matching the sudden and complete despair that filled him. His heart ached at the plight of his precious instrument, his only means of income, and his only real friend. Men and women laughed behind him, oblivious to the hopelessness of his condition. Their silhouettes stretched across the way as the light from the dance hall filled the night. The owner, a tall, lanky man with a pair of golden front teeth, stood in front of them all.
Real music, that's what he said he'd play.
He spit.
And you expect me to pay you for that noise? I'll pay to have a real performer entertain us, not some two-bit amateur who tries to pass himself off as some sort of professional. And I expect songs people know, not some horrible scratching of whatever you call that.
On cue, the notes from a saxophone filled the air, mocking Harry. To add to the insult, the people inside clapped along with the song. Harry turned to face the owner. Anger filled his voice.
You owe me my pay. We had an agreement, he motioned to his instrument, and you owe me for breaking my fiddle.
The owner spit again. His golden teeth caught the moon's light and sparkled when he sneered.
Owe you for that pathetic thing? You're the one who owes the rest of us for claiming you could play real music. That was the worst noise I've heard, and I've heard bad stuff in all the years I've owned this place. You know what I ought to do?
He jabbed his finger toward Harry.
What I ought to do is charge you for the privilege of not playing. The deal was that I'd pay for someone to entertain my customers. I didn't agree to make them listen to you.
He pointed down the way to where several couples walked back to town.
They won't be buying drinks tonight. I could charge you for their lost business, but I don't think you have a coin to your name. Count yourself lucky I don't have you arrested.
He kicked a rock at Harry.
Don't bother coming back here.
Harry blocked the rock with his arm, then picked himself up. He started toward the man with his hands balled into fists.
You owe me for my fiddle.
The 2 men who had thrown Harry out moved to either side of the dance hall's owner, making Harry stop. They crossed their arms, daring the musician to make another move. The owner snarled.
I don't owe you anything. I just did you and everyone else a favor. I'll do us all another favor and let others I know who own dance halls and concert halls to make sure they don't repeat my mistake of hiring you. Go find a real job.
Before stepping into the lights of the building, he told his henchman,
make sure he stays out.
He disappeared inside. The henchmen remained in their spots, arms crossed. Harry detested bullies, especially when he couldn't do anything about them. He turned away from the door. His back ached where he had landed and skidded across the rocks. His trousers, the only pair he owned, were torn. There wasn't enough money in the pockets to pay for another meal, much less more clothing, or for the repairs to his fiddle. A drum joined the saxophone. The audience continued clapping along with the tune, the Ballad of Bobby John, a silly song about a city man's attempt to woo a farmer's daughter. Every amateur musician knew the tune. Every beginning musician learned some form of it. The song was always a request at wedding receptions. Always. Harry hated the song. Despite it being overplayed, the people in the dance hall stomped their feet in rhythm. Several men whooped and ladies giggled in response. Harry stared into the night, where the full moon rose just above the trees. The face on it laughed at him as surely as everyone in the dance hall had laughed when the henchman grabbed him off the stage and carried him to the door. He focused on nothing, save for the distant stars. The voice of his old master, a thin man with stooped shoulders and sparse white hair, arose in his mind.
"The time will come,"
old Monty had told him in the first days after accepting Harry as his apprentice,
"when your dream will be mightily tested. You will be tempted to give up. You will find in that moment, young one, that you will be faced with your greatest temptations. It will be at that time when you will be faced with the choices that will determine the rest of your life. I'll tell you now, don't take the easy road. Don't choose the easy path. Remain strong and remain true to yourself. Only then will you find the dream worth living."
Old Monty had been a better man than he had been a musician, though his playing abilities were good enough to let him make a living for over 40 years. Harry stared at old Monty's fiddle. It had seen so many years and so many nights in dance halls, clubs, inns, and taverns that it could speak of endless stories, which it had through the songs both Harry and old Monty had played on it. Now the scroll and peg-box sat at a sickening angle. Old Monty had entrusted Harry with the instrument as he lay dying on a bed in an inn along a long-forgotten dirt road.
"Take good care of her, Harry. She's been to the places you're dreaming of, and will take you back with her."
He squeezed Harry's hand one last time. His voice lost its strength as he continued.
"You can do it, young one. You have the skills. You have the abilities. You will go far, and my fiddle will be with you every step of your journey. In this way, I will be too."
He smiled and closed his eyes before breathing his last breath. Harry slowly walked to the broken fiddle. He had failed old Monty. There was nothing he could do, short of robbing a bank, to fix the instrument. Several tears escaped his eyes, and he made no effort to hold them back. The fiddle had been a fine instrument, one that deserved a far better ending. Harry's pockets were as empty as his stomach. Paying gigs had been hard to find for 4 months, by far the longest stretch of difficult times in his 10 years on the road. Many days he had only eaten one meal. Several days, such as the one he found himself at the end of, he had gone hungry. Not even old Monty had suffered from such difficulties. Now Harry had no way of playing. The one thing he could do, and do well despite the dance hall owner's claim, was gone. If he worked another job until he had enough saved to repair the fiddle, it would take many months, perhaps years, especially given that he also needed a replacement to use for side gigs in the meantime. The reality of his situation struck in the deepest part of his belly. He never considered himself too proud to work other jobs, but to spend life without music, even if for a little while, he didn't think he could do it. What was life without songs? They fed his soul. They guided his steps. He had made them such a central part of his life for so long, and had dreamed of a lifetime of playing since he could hold a toy fiddle in his tiny hands. What was he to do now?
"Do I admit defeat?"
he asked the stars, his voice suddenly hoarse. Tears welled anew in his eyes.
"What is it, then? Am I the fiddler old Monty believed I was? Or am I the talentless hack the owner claims I am?"
He held his arms wide and waited for an answer.
"What is it to be? Give up? Stop trying?"
The stars remained as silently resolute as ever. Harry stared at them for a moment before he snorted.
"Do I have another choice?"
He was tired, the kind that reached into his bones and made every joint ache. Never had he thought about giving up, not even at the hardest times, or during a gig when only 3 or 4 were in the audience. Never until that moment. He wiped at his eyes before gathering the fiddle. Besides the broken neck and strings, scratches covered the back. 2 tuning pegs had broken off. The sight of the old, faithful instrument made Harry's chest ache even more. "Is this it, old friend?" he asked in a whisper, for fear his voice would crack. "You're a fine companion. You've seen so much. So tell me, is this it? Is young Harry's time as a traveling musician over? Is this the end of my dream?" He laughed a humorless, broken laugh. "There's probably a song to be written about this sad story. But I'm too—" He took a deep breath. "To what? Is there a proper word to build the song around? Worn out. That's 2 words. Shattered, disgusted, ashamed, dejected, depressed." He cradled the instrument in his arms and wandered down the road. Maybe all of them. Harry didn't care where he went. The road would take him somewhere. If he walked far enough and for long enough, perhaps he would find his end. "It was a good run," he said to no one other than the fiddle. "No, it wasn't a good run. Maybe it was good enough." He shook his head. "No, Harry, just admit it was a disaster. Why did I ever believe I was good enough? Why did I think I could make a living at this?" He walked down a dusty road leading through an ancient forest. The crickets and frogs and the screech of an owl serenaded his downcast spirit. He wiped the tears from his cheeks. The muscle on the back of his left thigh seized up. He rubbed it and took tall steps to loosen it. He shook it out before continuing onward. His shoulders drooped with hopeless resignation. He paused once to look at his fiddle. Maybe it wasn't as bad as he thought. It was beyond his means to repair. It was as broken as his soul. When his leg seized up a second time, the fiddle fell out of his hands as he rubbed the muscle. He hopped around, stomped his feet, and yelled, giving voice to his sadness and frustration. Still, the crickets and frogs continued their lonely and sympathetic droning. He snatched up his fiddle and stormed down the road. His tears blinded him as he went. A man traveled far. A man journeyed round to perfect his craft, to create new sounds. The years tumbled on. His prospects grew dim, when mocked for his songs and tossed on a whim. A dreamer dreams of songs well played, of audiences enthralled, of thousands of accolades. The night's passage became a progression of one step after another, with nothing except a hungry belly eating away at Harry, echoes of laughter, and the dance-hall owner's mocking voice rattling in his head, and visions of what old Monty's face would look like had he seen his fine instrument in its final state.
"The hard times are what makes us appreciate the good times even more," the old man liked to say. "Never lose sight of the good things to come."
"I need something good," Harry said to no one. "I need something better than good. I need a miracle." His leg seized for a third time, and worse than before. He ground his teeth while he rubbed the muscle. "I need a miracle, and this is what I get instead." Once the muscle relaxed and he could stand straight, he paused to assess his surroundings. The road stretched into the distance on either side, disappearing around bends that followed the whims and desires of the trees. The moon, having reached its zenith, bathed the land in its fullest light, creating shadows along the edge of the forest. They resembled crooked and bent creatures which clawed and grasped when the wind rustled the limbs and leaves. A cool gust blew down the road. It sent a chill through Harry and made his leg ache more. He had passed no other travelers. There were no wagon ruts in the dirt road, which had been reduced to a foot width by encroaching grass. He let out a breath of exasperation. There were too many songs for his liking of wayward travelers caught on such roads on nights of the full moon. Not a one of the stories in those songs ended well. Old Monty, ever a fountain of wisdom, had words concerning such situations. "Young one," he said, while they rocked in chairs on the porch of a tavern, "never let yourself be taken to a forest in the dead of night.
Those are the times when pixies, fairies, and other such creatures will prey on you. They love the deep woods. Their magic is strongest there."
Harry supposed it was a fitting place to find himself after the events of the evening, though he would have much preferred finding himself sipping a drink in a quiet corner of a tavern. He would have liked to have been on that porch once again, listening to old Monty's endless stories. A cry sounded from the trees on the right. Such was its softness that Harry had to stop breathing to listen. It barely carried over the rise and fall of the crickets. Harry looked up and down the way. Nothing moved, other than the trees in the breeze. "Best to keep going, young one," he said aloud. Though the sound of his own voice provided some comfort, he thought he heard fear deep within. "Just the wind making a noise, nothing to be frightened over. Just an old tree complaining, that's all. Perhaps a lonely bobcat or mountain lion." A wail filled the air, of such sadness and despair Harry choked. He stared into the darkness of the forest. The sound was not a tree. It was not an animal. He had heard a lady cry often enough, especially when playing Heather's Dream, to recognize the tone. It echoed the despair and misery filling him. 3 possibilities of what it might be came to Harry's mind. A band of robbers trying to draw in an unsuspecting traveler, a fairy trying to trap someone, or a lady who was truly sad and in need of comfort. If it was a band of robbers, they would probably kill him once they discovered the sad state of his current finances. Not even his fiddle was worth anything anymore. If it was a fairy trap, the creatures would wear him down to the point where he gave in to their demands, which would only lead to trouble. Every song about fairies said as much. The fairy song told of the lonely traveler who was captured by a fairy and was forced to serve her for the rest of his life. A Forgotten Evening spoke of the time fairies crashed a party and danced the night away before casting a spell to make the people forget what happened. There was a song about the fairies stealing a treasure, a midnight interlude. Another, The Traveler's Rest, recounted the poor man who was put under a spell that made him sleep 10 years away. The remaining possibility, that of a lonely lady in need of comfort, appeared to be the least likely by a good measure. If it was, however, he could offer a sympathetic ear. The thought of spending time with a lady, of listening to her, would be a welcomed change from the constant companion of loneliness. Given the nature of his vagabond ways, true companionship had eluded him through the years, despite his wishes to meet a special lady with whom he could share his adventures. The cry carried through the night once more. Lonely, dejected, definitely in need of comfort. Harry looked at his fiddle. It symbolized the current state of his life, broken, rejected, definitely in need of sympathy. Given the fact that so few people walked the road he was on, Harry surmised that it wasn't a band of robbers, unless they were the worst robbers who ever lived. The most reasonable possibility was a fairy trap. Old Monty's voice whispered in Harry's mind.
"The fairies are a loathsome lot. Not a one of them can be trusted."
He tapped his nose every time he spoke of the creatures.
"Take it from your old wizened master. I had a run-in with them in my younger days. Was lucky to walk away with my life. Never mess with a fairy. Never."
Harry looked down the road. Following it meant leaving the music behind, certainly for a short time, likely for a long time. He looked into the darkness of the forest. Going there might be his death. It might also be the solution to his problem. After all, the fairies meant magic. If he befriended them, maybe they would take pity on his predicament or agree to a deal. He could use a little magic in his life. If it was nothing more than a lady in need of comfort, at least he would find a sympathetic soul. Even that much was better than he had at that moment. Old Monty's warning about fairies mixed with the uncertainty of what he was about to do, making Harry's heart pound in his chest. He pressed the broken fiddle against his belly to calm his nervousness. A turn brought him face to face with the woods.
"Best to leave the fairies alone,"
the echo of old Monty said.
"Maybe,"
Harry answered. "Maybe it just doesn't matter anymore. Have you seen your old fiddle? Have you been following me these long months? Were you ever carried out of a dance hall and thrown to the ground?" He shook his head. If old Monty had, he never talked about it. "What am I supposed to do, old man? Take this chance? Or keep going down this road and leave the music behind?" He snorted at the answer to his own question. A step set him towards the shifting shadows of the trees, which seemed to dance in delight. The wail sounded yet again, though softer. A sob followed. Harry plunged into the bushes lining the edge of the forest. He pushed branches out of the way with his left hand. He missed one, and it slapped him across the cheek. He rubbed at the spot as he pushed a bush down with his foot. The wailing and sobbing stopped. Harry paused to listen. The crickets and frogs had stopped singing. After a moment, the sobbing arose again. He pushed through the bushes and into the forest proper. Light filtered through the canopy of leaves and branches high above in shafts of silver, illuminating patches of forest floor at random locations. One such shaft struck the trunk of an oak tree. Another lit a patch of purple-topped mushrooms on the ground. Still another landed on a clearing 100 yards ahead, where lights flashed and streaked. Harry moved closer, slowly stepping around the trees. 50 yards out, he stopped to stare. He rubbed his eyes to make sure he really saw what lay before him. A lady sat in the clearing. She buried her face in her hands, and her hair spilled around them. Lights flashed about her, and her sobs filled the forest once more. He slowly and quietly moved closer, making sure to keep her in sight. He paused twice to check the surrounding forest, sweeping his eyes from left to right. Nothing moved. No one else was around. He noted more details of the lady as he moved closer. Her hair was silver like the moonlight. Her skin was pale as if she had only ever known that very luminescence, and her frame was thin, with slightly elongated appendages. She wore a flowing green dress that shifted shades every time he stepped to one side or the other. That she was of the fairy kind was without question. He carefully stepped over a fallen branch, making sure not to snap a twig as he reached the edge of the clearing. Other than the lady and the flickering lights, like fireflies darting around in a tizzy, the clearing was empty. The scene was odd. Old Monty's voice urged him to go back to the road and told him he risked his very soul. What the old man still refused to recognize was the hopelessness of Harry's situation. He had nowhere else to go. If he helped her, she might help him. All he needed, more than food or mended trousers or a repaired fiddle, was a little magic. Just a little. Would that be too much to ask? Had life not been unkind enough already? If he helped a fairy in need, she would have to help him, wouldn't she? Downcast and lonely was he on the road that eve when he saw a fiddle too lovely to believe, an instrument unlike any before, one which was destined for legends and lore. A dreamer dreams of magic airs, of audiences entranced, giving birth to a nightmare. Harry stepped into the light of a full moon at exactly midnight, committing the very mistake Scotty McFarn did in The Fairy Song, which led to his entrapment and eventual death. Harry had long since lost track of the time, having no timepiece on him anyway. To further complicate his situation, he also approached a stranger sitting on an oak log, which anyone who sang "The Old Sprite" knew not to do. The lady didn't notice him. She continued sobbing, with her face buried in her slender hands. The lights swirled around her. Harry almost didn't want to bother her or disturb the sincerity and sanctity of her sadness. He thought she might be truly sad and wasn't looking to capture anyone. He glanced around once more. No other fairies jumped out. The crickets and frogs sang anew. The lady wailed so suddenly and loudly, Harry jumped back. He tried to cover his ears, but fumbled with his fiddle, resulting in a sprong of tangled strings. The lady immediately stopped crying, and the lights darted to the other side of the clearing. She lifted her head, but kept her face covered with her hands. She peeked at him from between her fingers. Harry froze, unsure of what to do. Only when the silence grew past the point of comfort did he clear his throat. "Are you hurt, madam?" His voice silenced the forest creatures. She continued to look at him from between her fingers. Her nails were an inch long and as black as the deepest shadow of the darkest night. He pointed back to the road. "I heard you from the road. I thought you might need—" His voice trailed off. Now that he spoke, he thought he sounded rather silly and had made a terrible mistake. The crack in his resolve let unease grow in the pit of his stomach. "Madam, I apologize for the interruption. It was wrong of me to disturb your sorrow." His fiddle slipped from his arm as he retreated. The broken neck swung, and he quickly pulled it back. "Are you a music man?" the lady asked, with a light voice that matched her fragile frame. She dropped her hands from her face. Harry gasped when he saw large eyes with pupils as white as the purest snow staring back. Her brows matched the color of her nails. Her red lips were the shade of blood. A narrow face highlighted her slender cheeks, thin nose, and sharp chin. In all his travels through the years, she was the most striking lady he had seen. Her beauty filled him. He wondered how it was possible for anyone like her to ever be sad or lonely. "Are you a music man?" she asked again, and pointed to his fiddle with a long finger. Harry tore his eyes from hers and looked at his instrument. His heart pounded in his head, and it took a minute for him to find his voice. Yes, I am." He cleared his throat. I thought I was." He held his broken instrument out. "My audience seems to think I'm not much of anything. I've only played twice in the last week. Admitting he had been thrown from the dance hall was too embarrassing for him to say more. A smile slowly spread across the fairy's face, though her eyes remained sad and distant. "I am a musician, too." The smile faded into a frown. She motioned to her left. "At least, I thought I was." Harry looked, but saw nothing. "What do you play?" She moved the skirt of her dress, which rippled and revealed a fiddle the same color as her eyes, with strings the same color as her brows, and tuning pegs the color of her lips. "This, or at least I tried." She sighed a very sad and dispirited sigh. "I'm afraid I'm not very good. I put as much magic into it as I could, but no amount of magic will cover just how terribly bad I am." She sniffed and turned away. "Oh, I'm embarrassed to admit as much." She waved him away. "Leave, please. Let me mourn alone. Let me find solace in the emptiness, for there's nothing left inside. I have given all to the fiddle. There is no more of me remaining to play songs." Harry barely heard her. Though the fairy was a breathtaking creature, her fiddle tickled his innermost desires. He had never seen anything so he struggled to give it a fitting description. Beautiful failed to give it a proper meaning. Gorgeous only hinted at its entire being. Stunning it certainly was, but more so than a breathtaking sunset filled with streaks of purples, blues, lavenders, and against a violet backdrop. It appeared to glow, and its light touched the same deep place as a special song or a lover's look. "A magic fiddle?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "I would like to hear it." He motioned toward it. "May I?" She covered it with her skirt. "Certainly not. Fairy magic, such as what fills this instrument, is not meant for the hands of mere mortals. I made it using the rarest wood in all the fairylands. No human hand has ever touched the trees or anything made from them. I had to pay a great price to get enough to make the instrument. The strings were created by the best fairy craftsmen, each made of the finest strand of fairy silver infused with a special magic. The tuning pegs are made from the heart of roses, a gem unlike any in your world. She shook her head. The magic will be too strong. It will consume you. Your music would be over before it began. It is a fickle thing anyway. It can be utterly naughty, and I don't completely understand why, she half whispered. Unless it has... Harry stared at where the fiddle hid. He thought he heard the whispers of its music playing against the backdrop of the forest song. It wove in and out of the breeze, emphasizing the crickets, and invited a lone wolf to howl. The sound broke his trance. What? He blinked to take in the clearing and the fairy. A dull throb in his head made him rub his temples. Even as he wondered what had just happened, he asked, "Can I hear you play?" She shook her head, letting her long hair cover her face. "It will only make you cry." "I doubt that, madam." He paused. "Have you taken any lessons? I could teach you." He gulped. "The Ballad of Bobby John. It's a simple tune. I'm sure the fiddle would sing under your touch." "I have tried to play. Oh, how I have tried." She looked to the sky, held her hands out, and cried again. "Why? Why does it refuse to cooperate? Why will it not let me play?" Harry wanted to console her, but had no idea where to begin. That she needed true comfort was obvious. "Have you had lessons? I could—" She stomped the grass and clenched her hands into fists. "I had the finest fairy instructor show me how to hold a bow, how to draw it across the strings, just so." She demonstrated by playing an air fiddle. "I held my chin in position, my elbow at the correct height, but when I played, oh, the screeches! He covered his ears and howled. Such was his revulsion that he refused to teach me more." She shook her fist. "I came here to see if the night and the forest might bring the instrument to life. I thought if no one else was around, the fiddle would cooperate." "It didn't?" Harry asked. "No. All I managed to do was wake the dead." She pointed to the side most insistently. "See?" Harry looked to the place she indicated. At first he didn't see anything, but when his eyes adjusted to the darkness of the forest, he sucked in a quick breath. A chill ran down his back. Empty eye sockets in a skull stared at him. Bones were scattered all about. Beside it, another skull had half risen from the ground. The single visible eye socket also stared. Finger bones stuck straight up next to it. The hairs on Harry's arms stood as upright as those bones. He gulped twice to try to find his voice. Is it you, or is it the fiddle?" She covered her face. "I don't know. It's only let one other hold it, the master who tried to teach me. He played the most haunting and beautiful tune on it. It was the kind of song you only hear once in your life. Twice, if you're truly blessed. The notes still plague my dreams. They taunt and tease when I sleep." She wept anew. "I think the fiddle enjoys torturing me. Why? When I'm the one who put so much of my own magic into its creation, when I gave it a part of myself, when I'm the one who meticulously created it, why does it hate me?" The fairy's tears and anguish drove Harry to his knees. "It can't be that bad. Maybe you need the right teacher. Maybe your first teacher was jealous of your instrument and didn't teach you the right way." "Oh, he was jealous. He tried to claim the fiddle for himself. He tried to steal it away, and when I caught him, he tried to buy it from me. When I refused, he begged me." Her body shivered. "I have never seen someone sound so pitiful. He almost convinced me to let him have it, but the thought of someone else possessing something of myself made me refuse." She peeked from between her fingers once again. Her voice carried a tone of deadly seriousness. "When I refused his begging, he tried to kill me. He tried to cast his own spell to cut off my air and choke me." The fiddle remained hidden behind her skirt. Harry wanted to see it again. Surely it wasn't as bad as she claimed. "What happened to your teacher?" She dropped her hands in her lap. She looked down for a moment before slowly bringing her eyes up to Harry's. "I killed him," she stated in a simple tone. "Oh, don't look at me like that." Harry eased his surprised expression. The thought of such a beautiful creature harming someone seemed as strange as his playing to a packed concert hall. It was his turn to look down as he remembered his sad state. "I had to." The fairy reached for Harry's hands. Her skin felt as smooth as the most elegant silk and softer than the best down-filled cushion. "The desire to own the fiddle possessed him to the point of madness. Don't you see? Don't you understand? I know you do, Music Man. It's the reason we are both here in this place. We have found where all those go who are at the end of their musical journeys." She squeezed his hands, and her eyes grew wide. Her voice matched her excitement. "All I want is to play music, beautiful music, just like you do. It's been the dream of my life. I've sacrificed so much in order to try to make it happen." The depths of her dream within her white eyes matched the same one filling Harry. Her despair echoed his own. "You were told you would never be able to, by your music master." A smile spread across her face, making Harry's heart skip a beat. "Yes, just as you say, just as you claim. I knew we were the same, Music Man." Harry squeezed her hands in return. Had he found a sympathetic soul? Could it be that they were meant to find each other? There had to be a song about a happy ending with the fairy, if he could just remember one. Surely old Monty didn't know everything about the creatures. I was told the same thing. As of tonight, I was beginning to believe it. I was thrown out of a dance because they didn't like the song I played, one I had written myself. They booed and howled at me. The taunts stung sharper than any had before. True, he had received plenty of jeers through the years. Every musician had to endure them. The latest ones, however, had been different. 2 men grabbed me. They didn't even give me the dignity of finishing the song. I was only 2 verses into it when they yanked my fiddle out of my hands and threw me out the door. He paused. Then they threw the fiddle. He nodded to his broken instrument, which lay on the ground next to him. It had been a true companion, truer than any person could be. "An instrument worthy of the fanciest princess or noblest lord," old Monty had said. "This fiddle has played the finest chords, and under your hand it will do so again." Harry's stomach twisted. He had failed, old Monty. He had failed in everything. It's hard to let these instruments go, isn't it? They become extensions of ourselves. We pour the depths of our souls into them. Happy tunes lift us up or let the world know we're confident in ourselves. Sad tunes express the sorrow filling us. Funny tunes let the world laugh with us. A forlorn smile spread across his face. Music is the purest form of emotions. It describes our feelings when words are not enough, when words are inadequate. The fairy put her fingers on his chin and forced him to look at her. "You do understand, Music Man." Delight filled her voice. "You speak of and understand my dilemma. You, too, suffer for a greater cause, one that remains just out of reach. We are poor old souls, you and I." A sparkle moved from her left eye to her right eye. She spoke with a higher, more excited voice. "What if we help each other, you and I? What if the end of our dreams marks the creation, the birth of a new one?" She reached for his fiddle. "What if I fix this for you? What if we work together?" She sucked in a quick breath. "Why, you could give the fairyland something new and unique. What do you think, Music Man?" Harry placed his hand over his heart. "Madam Fairy, if I agree to whatever it is you are proposing, you will surely make me play until I die." She drew back. "Who is to say I would make you do so, Music Man? I'm thinking of a way we can both benefit and let music soar across the lands." She stretched her arms wide. "You would play to a captive audience every night. Can you imagine that, Music Man? Is that what you desire?" She lowered her arms and looked at him with pleading eyes. She playfully bit her lower lip. Her enthusiasm intrigued Harry, but old Monty's warnings kept him from readily agreeing. He held his hands out in a pleading gesture. "You are a mysterious folk, known mostly through lore and songs. It is true that neither speaks highly of your people." His words trailed off when her face melted into a scowl. "The songs speak of fairy tricks in less than honorable arrangements. He could not think of a single good fairy song, despite running through a dozen. Does the music speak truly? Am I in danger by even talking to you? How do I know I can trust you? A wave dismissed his words. Do you believe everything your silly songs say about us? Her voice took on a menacing tone. What do you, a mere human, know of fairy kind? That we are cruel? That we are mean-spirited? We are not sprites, like these free spirits darting around us, who never consider their actions. Neither are we pixies, who enjoy the suffering of others. She flung her hair back and sat straight. We are an honorable folk, misunderstood by those who know nothing of us, who make foolish songs to scare children. Harry shrugged. Only a fool dismissed old Monty's words. The man had good reason not to trust the fairies. But I ask, perhaps I dare to ask, what your people think of humans. Do you believe we are ignorant? Do you think we are much like children with wild imaginations and little perspective? Do we live so quickly that we are like a candle flame, burning bright for a time, then being snuffed out by the wind? Is that what your songs say of my people? When she hung her head, he knew he was right. The fairy took a deep breath. There is much we can learn from each other, Music Man. She nodded, as if to affirm something to herself. You only make me more determined in this deal we will make. The best way for us to understand is to work together. I will fix your fiddle, and you will come with me to my lands. You will play for my people and let them hear music they've never heard. They will adore you. They will sing your praises. They will invite you to our most glorious courts and shower you with honor beyond your imagination. Would you like that, Music Man? The sprites, which had remained on the other side of the clearing, swarmed around Harry. Their voices were like fleeting whispers. Play forever and ever. Entertain us. Stay with us. The magical land told of a man who snuck into the fairy world in a quest for rare treasure. The strangeness of the place drove him to madness. Though he tried to escape, he was too crazy to remember where he had entered. If there was any truth to the song, Harry wasn't sure he wanted to take the chance of losing his sanity. What about your own dream? Do you not want to play your own music? Besides, you haven't heard me play. What if I'm not good enough? What if your people hate my music? She held his fiddle in her hands. You speak truly, Music Man. I believe I am destined to play great music. I feel it in my very bones. Since I completed my fiddle, I have known it deep within. I can teach you how to play so you too can enthrall your people. Let me help you with your dream. You can give me an instrument of magic, and I can give you lessons of quality. He grimaced, because his part of the offer sounded so poor and unworthy. He quickly added, Perhaps your first teacher simply didn't want you to outperform him. Did he teach you wrong? Was he jealous of what you might do? Harry had run across enough cutthroat musicians who competed with him for the same opportunities and venues. Most other traveling musicians respected their fellow players enough to at least not be a hindrance, but there was always one who did everything he or she could to gain an upper hand. The fairy paused. Music Man, do you think that is possible? I think we can achieve our dreams together. I will win the human lands and you will win the fairy lands, and we will do so with music of such power that every person and fairy will be moved. We will make them laugh, cry, love, and hate. Through it all, we will have them begging for more. Harry would prove to the dance hall owner and all the others that they had been terribly wrong. Could it be that he could hope again? Was his dream truly within reach? The fairy looked at her instrument, but kept it hidden from Harry's sight. 10 years I devoted to making it. 10 years I dedicated to its creation. 10 years? He asked, barely containing his excitement. It is the same amount of time I've been trying to live my dream. She gave him a curious look, with her head tilted to the side. Is that true, Music Man, or do you tease me? It's a coincidence almost too true to be real. She clapped her hands in delight. Oh, Music Man, this means what I surely thought it did. Don't you agree? We are meant to work together. Our music should be joined together to delight man and fairy alike. Before Harry could protest or clarify the arrangement, she put his fiddle's neck back into place. With a wave of her hand, she restored it. I will make this the finest fiddle in all the lands." She held her hand to her mouth in mock surprise. "I mean the second finest fiddle." She touched the bridge, turning it silver at the same time the strings turned black. "Do you like what you see so far? I can make it a new instrument, one that will sing at your touch, which will draw an audience into the spells of your songs." She paused to look at him. "Would you like that?"
Of course Harry would like that. "Yes,"
almost escaped his lips, but old Monty's sage words once again stopped him. "What is it you're expecting from me in return? I will be glad to teach you how to play." She shifted towards him and slipped her arm through his. Instead of warmth, cold emanated from her. Harry shivered. "Would you like to play for the rest of your life?" she asked. "It would be all you have wanted. What do you think, music man? You can have what you've longed for, what you've worked for, what has been just out of reach. Don't you deserve this chance? You can have exactly what you've worked so hard for," she said in a low and seductive voice. "An appreciative audience who would hang onto your every note. We won't throw you out, laugh at you, and expect you to play one silly song after another." He dared not look into her eyes. If he did, he would be lost forever. She ran her hands over the body of Harry's fiddle. The worn brown wood turned black. The edges caught the moon's light, reflecting it with winks like dull silver. The tailpiece turned the same shade of red as the tuning pegs. The instrument glowed while she worked on it. She hummed to herself. The sprites surrounded the instrument. They slowed enough that Harry caught glimpses of their small bodies and wings. When they touched the strings, the black turned deeper. When they touched the neck, it glowed brighter. A smile spread across the fairy's face and spoke of peace, of contentment. She was sure of what she did, even if Harry wasn't. He did wonder, however, if agreeing with her proposal would be such a bad ending. At least he would be playing and doing exactly what he had set out to do in his life. If he refused her gift, he would face life without music and possibly go mad. If he accepted her proposal, he would play for the rest of his life and possibly go mad. He chuckled to himself, which made her stop. "What do you think so far, music man? Is this not the second finest fiddle you have seen?" She ran her fingers down the strings of Harry's fiddle, producing a light screeching sound that pierced his ears. He glanced behind her and saw the skulls shaking in delight. "I can give you a bow that will never break," the fairy quickly said. "The strings would be made from my own hair." She held out a strand for him to touch. "The finest hair will make the finest notes." He didn't move, so she shook her hair at him. "Feel, touch, tell me if it is not the softest hair, softer than the finest fairy cloth." Harry's hand trembled from excitement when he reached out. Having never had money or occasion to feel fine fairy cloth, he could only guess as to a good comparison. It felt softer than silk, softer than her skin. She didn't flinch when he pulled out several strands and worked them into thin strings. She took a piece of the log she sat on and shaped it into a proper bow length. The sprites surrounded it too. They touched the hair and the wood, making the bow sparkle. The fairy shifted closer to him, so close her hand brushed his arm when she held his fiddle up. "Music man, you will enthrall your audience with your new instrument." She leaned against him, and her breath, as sweet as autumn air, washed over him. "What do you think, music man? Does its sight please you?" She held the fiddle and bow before them. Old Monty's instrument had been transformed into an even finer instrument, which Harry had never imagined was possible. "It's more than I deserve, Madam Fairy. I'm not worthy of such a gift." He spoke from his heart. He didn't believe his skills matched such a fine instrument. "I fear I will only hold such an instrument back from its fullest potential." She offered them to him. "Music man, you will play like you never have before. Why don't you let us listen to you now?" The small fairies flew around Harry. "Play your music, let us hear, make us dance, make us sing." Harry hesitated. His dream lay within his grasp, though not quite how he had imagined it happening. All the nights on the road, when he slept beneath the trees, or happened to have enough money to pay for a cot in a traveler's inn, could be a distant memory if he took the fiddle. His empty stomach might never miss a meal again. That it was a fairy who believed in him and who gave him the break he desperately needed was not lost on him. He took the fiddle and bow. Both felt as light as feathers. "Are you sure, madam? Are you sure it's me you want to hear?" She waved at him. "Play for us, music man." She shifted as she sat on the log, exposing her fiddle once more. Harry's gaze connected with the instrument. The white wood, whiter than the fairy's eyes now that he saw clearer, begged him to take it up, to caress it, to play only it. He wasn't sure, but he thought he heard a voice in his head rise and fall like musical notes. "Why settle for such an instrument as you hold when you can have me? Why settle for humankind when you can have them and the fairy world as well? Why settle for half when you can command the whole?" Harry thought the question a fair one. Why should he settle for just the fairy world when he could enthrall both worlds? "How?" he asked, then realized he had spoken aloud. "You are the music man," the fairy said. "Play us a song, any song you desire." The sprites laughed in anticipation. They flew in and around the two. The white fiddle spoke once more. "When you play that instrument, your songs will still be your own. When you play me, your songs will be magic." "Is something wrong, music man?" the fairy asked. Harry tore his gaze away from her instrument. "No, just thinking of an appropriate song to play." He cleared his throat before placing the fiddle on his shoulder. "This is an important occasion, and the song selection should not be taken lightly." "Nor should you play alone. Ask her to play. Ask her to join." Harry placed the bow against the strings. He closed his eyes to block out the other fiddle. Surely he just imagined it talking. His fiddle would be sufficient. He was about to achieve everything he wanted. It was enough. He drew the bow, and the first note filled the night air. The sprites hovered in place, while the crickets and frogs quietened. He played the next note, still not knowing which song he should choose. When the third note sounded, he began the nighttime interlude, a song about dreams becoming reality, and reality distorting into dreams. He didn't try to sing the lyrics, however. The power in the notes and the way they sounded fuller, as if a dozen fiddles played in perfect synchronization, filled his ears to the point where he imagined he stood in the middle of a music hall. Each note immersed him in their tone. "This is but a taste of what I can give. Pick me up, and you will be in the midst of an orchestra. My power will make your own instrument seem like a child's toy." Harry continued playing, letting the notes swell and their sound fill him. The sprites flew in pairs, spinning and moving all about the clearing. The fairy smiled and slightly rocked back and forth on the log. Harry wondered what he could do with the instrument in a dance hall like the one from which he had been thrown. Of course, with an instrument like his, he would never again have to play a dance hall in the backwoods of a forgotten village. He could play a proper concert hall. "With me, you can play in palaces. You will have kings and queens giving you gifts just for the opportunity to hear more of your wonderful music. Imagine the riches and the wealth you will have. Imagine the heights of your popularity. I can take you there if you will simply hold me. Let my power flow through you." Harry missed a note, which caused the sprites to pause and the fairy to suddenly look up. When she shifted on the log, the edge of her skirt fell across her fiddle, silencing the voice in Harry's head. He corrected the song and scolded himself for letting his imagination get the best of him. He told himself he had let the magic of his improved fiddle distract him. The sprites resumed their dance. They giggled and laughed when Harry finished the song with a flurry of notes. While the last note faded into the night, the lights surrounded him. "Play again, music man. Play more. Play a proper dance song. Play until the sun rises. Play for us." Harry took deep breaths. He lowered the fiddle and blinked to clear his mind. His ears roared as if he had listened to an orchestra in the front row for an hour. His head ached like something had pounded him on the back, trying to make him understand. He stared at the fiddle and wondered what had just happened. The fairy stood and clapped. "Well done, Music Man, well done!" Her smile lit up the darkness creeping over the clearing as the full moon set. "You have proven yourself capable and worthy of playing my gift." Harry bowed to her. "You have given me a truly great gift. Now let me teach you how to play. Let's release the power of your—" He paused, then held his fiddle out. "Play this. Then we'll know if it's you or your fiddle." "There is only one fiddle I want to play, Music Man, and I do not believe it wants me to play it. The fiddle is a naughty one." She gave Harry a long look. "Now that you have proven you are worthy of my gift, let us go to my lands. You will see places and creatures you never imagined. With my help and guidance, you will capture their hearts with your songs. Will that be an acceptable agreement, Music Man?" Harry looked to the forest. Beyond waited a world that had rejected his music. He had no lasting contacts. He had no relationships. No one would miss him. What would he be giving up if he agreed? Nothing. But he would gain the very thing he wanted. What did it matter if he earned the praise of a fairy instead of a human? The idea of seeing and experiencing what no other human had intrigued him. How long would I last in your world? The fairy gazed into the night. The sprites swirled around her. Harry heard them say, "You will have to protect him. He will go mad. You risk being cast out. It will be daring." She nodded slowly. "You are right to be cautious, Music Man. I cannot give you assurance of longevity. I can only assure that you will burn as bright as the sun. You will give my people something they've never heard, a human's music with a fairy's power. Together we can bridge the misunderstandings between our people. We can show them what we can do when we put our differences aside." She offered her hand. "Does that agree with you? I will be your guardian and protector." She took a deep, satisfied breath. "Please agree. Please say yes and follow me." While Harry considered whether to chance his life, the fairy reached down and took her fiddle. She cradled it in her arm. "Do not agree. You were right in saying you should both play. Your music will be better together. Listen and learn. Ask, and it will be yours." The suggestion seemed sensible to Harry. "You must indulge me, Madam Fairy. Having stirred my interest and curiosity, I still believe that our music can be better together. Much like you have not given up on my dream, I will not so easily give up on yours. You have heard me play." He pointed to her fiddle. "It is only fair and fitting that I hear you play." She gave him a nervous laugh. "Music Man, I don't believe you would survive the experience. You would be haunted for life." "Don't listen to her. She is merely an amateur. She doesn't deserve to play my special strings. She hasn't earned the right to let my music soar to the heavens." He had something special with his restored fiddle, but he could do even more if he had hers. He just had to— Harry shook his head. He broke her grip and stepped away. What was he doing? Everything he wanted was his the moment his dream was ending. It had become possible. He didn't need anything else. Except a new longing filled him. It touched his fingers and toes and his soul. He yearned to hold the white fiddle in his hands, to feel the smoothness of the wood. The certainty that it belonged to him was the same as he felt when he decided to pursue a professional musical career. It gnawed at his bones and tugged at his soul. "One song," he said. "Please." The fairy studied her instrument. She looked at Harry. "Have you not listened to what I've said? The fiddle has its own mind. It's likely to kill you rather than let you hear its sound." "What if I covered my ears?" The fairy shook her head with such force her hair flung from side to side. "Music Man, the fiddle has its own mind. I refuse to take the chance of it killing you." Push her. You need to experience what I offer, and then you'll know for certain that I was made for you, not her, not anyone else. She is right. I have my own mind. I have chosen you. Do not throw away this honor. I will unleash the power of your songs." Harry slumped his shoulders and pouted. "I will agree to go if you let me hear you play. When will I have a chance to hear the instrument otherwise? We will be surrounded by adoring fairies once they hear me play. We'll never be alone like we are now." The fairy looked at her instrument once more. "Do not fear to listen. Do not fear to hear." "Please," Harry asked in his most pitiful tone, "try one note. If it's so bad, you don't have to play another." "It won't let me play it," she said in a low voice, almost to herself. "I will allow her. One last time. Her resolve is breaking. Push her further. Convince her." He put a hand on her arm. "Maybe it was waiting for me to be with you. Is it not worth a try?" Desperation filled her eyes. She wanted to play it so badly. It hurt her deep inside. Harry knew the same longing. "Try. I believe in you like you believe in me. Imagine the music we can play together. Can you not hear it even now? A melody and a harmony weaving new tales and drawing in sprites and pixies alike." The fairy took a deep breath. Her arm twitched like she wanted to lift the fiddle to her shoulder. Harry leaned closer. "One note. You worked so hard to create the finest fiddle in 2 lands. Try it once more. Pour your soul into it. Let your music soar." She spoke in a near whisper. "Do you truly believe in me, music man? Dare I play the instrument?" The absolute despair in her voice struck Harry and rattled the trance that had overtaken him. What was he doing? Why did he want to risk hurting her? "You will only help her to understand. The truth hurts, but it must be known. I am yours. You are mine. Together we will be great." Harry pressed a hand against his forehead. The longing to take the white fiddle almost drove him to his knees. He shuddered once. "One note, please." The fairy sighed. "If I do this, music man, will you agree to go with me? Will you agree to let me be your muse? I will protect you. We will captivate my people. Together." "Yes," he said the word so quickly he blinked in surprise. He had just done what needed to be done. The fairy brought the fiddle to position against her shoulder and closed her eyes. "It will break my heart if it makes another screech." She lifted her bow. Harry adjusted the height of her elbow and helped her position the bow on the strings. "Draw the bow across the E string, just a little pressure." The fairy hesitated. "If it screeches?" "It won't," Harry said. "She is an amateur." "Will you let her play?" he asked. "That is what we will find out," the fairy answered. She closed her eyes. "By all that flows through the lands of the Fae, please let one pleasant note come from these strings." Harry thought the fiddle laughed. The fairy drew the bow across the string. A single note filled the air. Though it clawed at Harry's ears, the magic it carried punched him full in the chest. He stumbled back. "This will be your power. This is what you are meant to release." The fairy stomped around the clearing. "Why?" she wailed. "Why does it refuse?" She shook the fiddle in one hand and the bow in the other. "I gave it a part of myself. It possesses a piece of me. Why does it despise me so?" She shook it in front of her. "Why, you cursed instrument of grief and torture?" She sobbed and dropped the fiddle. She buried her face in her hands, much like she had been doing when Harry found her. The same desperate wail filled the air. Harry stared at the fiddle. "Pick me up. I belong to you." Before the fairy realized what she had done, Harry grabbed the fiddle. Sparks flew between his hand and the wood, making his skin tingle. He pulled the fiddle to his chest, sending bolts of energy into his torso. He sucked in a quick breath when it filled his chest, spread to his shoulders, then to his thighs, legs, and arms. The last of the moon's light shined as bright as the noon sun around him. He saw everything clearly, including the skulls, both of which had moved away from the clearing. He thought he caught small flames within the eye sockets of each. He also saw through the lights of the sprites. He made out each of them. Some had flowing white hair. Others had long, slender bodies. They all had eyes too big for their head. He smiled at a lady sprite flittering about in front of him. She stopped and kissed the tip of his nose, giggled, and flew away in a zigzag. Each of their voices filled his ears. "He has the fiddle. He will play. Make us dance. Release the magic. Let it take flight. Show us the power." The aches and pains from being tossed onto his backside disappeared, including the ache in his leg. His hunger was gone, too. The power filling him overwhelmed every part of his body. He was more alive than he had ever been. His body buzzed with life. The world was his to conquer. "I am all you need. Release my song into the night." Harry brought his bow to the strings. He stumbled as his head grew lighter. His skin ached when he moved, and the air shifted. The buzzing of the sprites was drowned by the buzzing of his ears. He could simply let go of himself and allow the power to have its way, or he could play. "Wait," the lady said, reaching out. "Don't—" Harry drew the bow across the strings, letting one beautiful note fill the air. He shifted the bow. His fingers pressed the strings and took on a life of their own, recalling the most recent song he had written, "The Maiden's Call." The power of the fiddle and the bow gave the song its own life. The rich notes filled the air, wrapping around the sprites and sending them into a tizzy. They laughed and giggled and tumbled head over heels. The music wrapped itself around Harry, too, drawing him into the next note and the next. Though he had always tried to play the perfect song and had come close on 3 occasions, never had he played so perfectly as he did at that moment. He closed his eyes and focused only on the weaving of notes, letting the song sail high into the night. He didn't sing. His voice would have tarnished the tapestry of the melody. There were only notes, rich and powerful, bold and mesmerizing. The fairy closed her eyes, too. She rocked on her heels. Harry opened his eyes long enough to see her thus. "Build the power. Let it flow freely through you. Let not her magic check you." The notes wrapped around the fairy the same way they had the sprites. She tilted her head back and stretched her arms to the sides. Harry played the song with more intensity, which allowed more of the magic to flow into the notes. He no longer felt his feet or legs. Sparks of electricity raced through his torso. "This is but a taste of my power. You will learn how to use it more, so you can blossom and flower." The sprites raced even faster. Their laughter and giggles slowly turned to howls of pain. The fairy gasped and opened her eyes wide. Her smile painfully stretched across her face. Tears dropped like small silver balls from the corners of her eyes. "Stop! Please, stop!" "The morning is yours to control. Your future is set if you're brave enough to seek it." Harry saw his life before him. Crowds applauded, adoring women blew kisses, and a king placed his crown at Harry's feet. He would be more than a musician. "You will be a god." "But that's not what I want." Something was wrong, though Harry didn't know what to do to stop it. "Trust me to make your dreams come true. Carry me into your lands and see how your songs will create legends." "Does it speak?" the fairy asked. "Does it call to you? What does it promise?" "More than you can imagine. Make her promise not to kill you. Make her give me to you. Force the assurance. Bring the words to her lips." "Don't listen," she said. "The words are poison. It will kill you, and look for another. It must be possessed of the darker side of me, of the darker side of my magic," she cried, and closed her eyes tight. "That must be what is wrong." "You said fairies are not full of tricks," Harry said above the notes. "Do you trick me now?"
Do not listen, do not worry, I will give you all, just hurry.
More tears flowed down the fairy's cheeks. I seek not to trick you, I seek only to keep you from that which will destroy you.
I was not created to destroy. I was created to bring pleasure, to show what music can do, to entrap all in my notes.
Harry wasn't sure what to do. Give in or give up?
Remember the laughter and the taunts. They echo in your memories like ancient truths.
The fairy fiddle filled Harry's eyes with overflowing concert halls and an endless parade of admirers. The fiddle would not only make his dream real, but it would give him more than he thought possible. Had he been thinking too small? Had his dream been so little? The laughter of the audience at the dance hall echoed in his mind. The owner's golden teeth sparkled again when his henchman tossed Harry out.
They fail to understand genius. Their idea of music is no better than a child's idea of what it means to be grown. They are simpletons and fools.
Harry could use the fiddle for a few days or a couple of weeks. He could at least taste what success was before he returned it to the fairy. Would that be so wrong? Didn't he deserve that much after enduring hunger and storms that left him drenched because he couldn't afford a place to sleep? All he needed was a little magic, after all. He looked at the fairy. She swayed and looked to the sky.
Do not think, do not tarry, make her promise, then leave the fairy.
He did think too much. For once, he would do what was necessary. He stepped closer to the fairy. I will stop on these conditions. You will let me leave this clearing, you will give me this fiddle, and you will not kill me. The fairy took shallow breaths.
I will not.
Harry played faster, making her stretch her arms wider. She moaned. You will not what? He transitioned the song from one of intense fury to one of deep longing, with drawn-out and sad notes. The fairy's body relaxed. She crumpled into a heap and sobbed. The sprites fell to the ground like 1,000 stars falling from the night sky. They, too, sobbed. The slower pace let Harry's arm rest, but it took more mental exertion for him to consciously funnel the power. He wasn't sure how long he could hold the spell. I can keep going as long as I need to. I can keep going until you give me what I want, what I deserve. The fairy reached out in a plea.
Do not seek this. Listen not to the voice of the fiddle. The promises are empty. It will abandon you when it no longer has need of you. I will never abandon the one I was meant to serve. Do not listen to her lies. They are spoken out of jealousy and envy.
Harry adjusted the song to a light-hearted ditty, Granny's Fanny, which made the fairy laugh so hard she curled into a ball. Harry jumped around the clearing, forcing the sprites to dart out of his way, even as they, too, laughed. Will you let me go? He sang in rhythm to the music. Will you let me go and give me what I want? I wonder and I wander, I skittle and I diddle. Will you let me go, little fairy?
I will not.
Harry changed the song once again, this time to a dark tune that spoke of death and destruction, of sweeping battles that left the land devastated and armies crushed. Will I march through your land? Will you know the touch of death? I am the one who brings change, who masters your fate. I am the one every creature fears. I am the bringer of darkness. His voice carried anger. His notes sounded despair. The fairy shivered, still in her ball on the ground. Harry swept his feet through the grass, scattering the sprites. Their tiny voices lifted up their collective hopelessness. Will you give me what I want? Will you give me what I need? I wonder if another tune will bend you to my will. He plucked the strings with his fingers, then slid them down, making the fiddle howl and screech. He plucked the strings again, then used the bow to complete the song of darkness. He immediately transitioned into another, lighter tune, one meant to be danced to. The fairy uncurled herself. Her feet kept time while she moved to stand upon them. If the fiddle had the power to bend the will of the fairy, what wonders could he work with mere men? No one could match the spells his music would create. He would have kings and queens begging him to play at their courts. They would wage wars over who was privileged to hear his music. No more dusty towns, no more rundown dance halls, no more silly and frivolous tunes to please a crowd. He would be the greatest ever. The fairy hugged herself as she spun around the clearing, keeping time to his song. The sprites joined her. They circled and stepped, slid and leapt. The lights of the flying creatures wove a tapestry of streaks that encased the fairy in a cylinder of living, pulsing life. "What say you, fairies?" Harry sang. "What do you decide? Will you dance to the death, or will you give me my wish? What say you, fairies?" The fairy spun, but kept her focus on Harry. Oddly, sadness filled her eyes, as if she pitied Harry. "What say you, fairies? What will it be? A song of sadness, a song of laughter, a song of release. What say you, fairies?" The fairy stumbled while the sprites darted in every direction. She picked herself up and spun faster. Her arms swung uncontrollably, her head tilted from one side to another. Harry played a flurry of notes that made the fairy stumble once again while trying to spin faster. She landed on her knees. Her feet continued to keep the beat. "Enough," she said with a hoarse voice. "I will grant your wishes." Harry moved closer to her. He slowed the song to one of a waltz. He let the flow of the magic dissipate enough that the numbness stopped moving up his legs. "What wishes are those? You must speak them." The fairy bit her lip until it bled. "Shall I strike up another tune to tickle your soul? Shall I summon the storms and the rains to pound you without mercy?" Harry played several sharps to emphasize his threat. The fairy covered her ears. "Enough! You are free to leave the clearing. No fairy will kill you." She swallowed hard. "You are given the gift of the fiddle." She took quick breaths. "You will regret this. The gift is a curse." Laughter filled Harry's head. "We are free, free to take what we desire and what we deserve. We will travel the lands and let the music soar." Harry played the quieter notes of a lullaby. "Sleep, my fairy friends, sleep and lose yourself in the rest. Close your weary eyes. Let your weary bodies have peace." He spoke quietly as he stepped to the edge of the clearing. "Rest, my fairy friends. Slumber and forget yourself in the quiet. Rest your weary heads. Let your dreams come to life." He stepped across the clearing, not bothering to try to avoid the sprites. He kept his eyes on the fairy. The fairy closed her eyes and her body relaxed. She looked beautiful, far more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. Harry stepped out of the circle. He let the song fade as he moved through the forest. When it ended, he almost collapsed too. The magic left him empty, which stirred the hunger in his belly. He felt as if he had not eaten in a week. "It is time to play. You need no rest, no food. I will give you everything." "If I don't eat, who will give your music life?" At the road, he paused. The moon sank in the west, and the promise of a new day was not far off. "You have a place to go, a place to seek. Let my power take them. Let them know who you are. Play now." "You are right, friend. The dance hall owner should have paid him. The audience should have listened to him more. He was about to exact a far higher price than they would have paid otherwise. He turned back to the village and the dance hall. Yes, he would have to see just what his new fiddle could do. The dream lives on, in waking and sleeping, driving and haunting. Its strains unending across the human land. The magic spreads, binding young and old with deadliest threads. A fiddle dreams of days to come, when music and magic flows with spells of delirium. The notes carried through the dance hall. The magic imbued itself in the rise and fall of the song. It flowed through Harry's body, replacing the beat of his heart with pulses of tingling, electrifying life. "A man from the city," he sang with the strongest voice he had known.
traveled from home. He sought a lady to call his own. His bow skipped along the strings, forcing the crowd to clap and stomp even faster. Bobby John, such a name he claimed, was a fool with ideas and riches to match, so he dressed as a prince and strutted about to impress every lass whom he considered a catch. The crowd had enjoyed the ballad of Bobby John the night before, but they had never experienced it the way Harry gave it to them. He played an extended bridge, letting the power of the fiddle wrap in and through each person. They responded with more whoops and giggles than even the musicians who had replaced him the previous night had earned. Speaking of those men, they sat to the side of the stage and stared with eyes wide and mouths open, as if they were trapped in the surprise of Harry's arrival. He started playing in the middle of their song, and though they had tried to drown Harry's notes with their own, the magic struck them before they knew what happened. Bobby John reached the village of Crichton by the Sea, where he set himself up as a man of some means to impress the locals whom he thought would be dazzled. He dressed in his finest and walked with his nose in the air. Harry changed the notes on the fly, making them sharper to give an ominous air. The crowd responded by immediately becoming still. Their faces turned pale.
Drive them to their feet, feed their desire to dance, to let themselves be free.
Harry played louder, pouring more magic into the notes. He acted as a conduit from the fiddle to the audience, letting them feed and feed and feed. The audience responded by locking arms with a partner and swinging around. The music and the magic drove them faster and faster. Harry took in their expressions of joy as they let themselves go. Without the magic, not even his best song on his best day could have created such a response.
You have my power now. You need nothing else.
Sally May came skipping, her ponytail dancing, her face a beam of sunshine and laughing.
Harry turned his attention to the dance hall owner. He directed the notes to the man to make sure he felt every driving beat down to his soul.
Bobby John saw her and fell immediately in love, with neither concern nor care.
The owner smiled, and his golden teeth twinkled. He stared at a distant object, as if entranced by the one thing he most desired.
Fill him with more magic, drive him to the edge, make him pay for what he did, make him pay for what he dared.
Had he not broken my fiddle, Harry replied to the voice, then I would have never found you. He walked toward the owner. He does, however, owe me for my old fiddle, and a meal he never gave. He paused in front of the man. The owner continued staring at something distant. His smile spread wider across his face, to the point that the corner of his eyes crinkled in pain.
When Sally May saw her bow, she giggled and laughed and stole his soul.
Harry wanted to pick the owner's pockets, but to do so meant he had to stop playing. If he stopped playing, the magic would end, and that was simply not acceptable. The magic let him see everything with a new clarity. The people in the room looked so young. A glow surrounded them, generated by the light burning hot inside them. They would live such short lives as compared to the fairies.
Drive the man to his knees. Let him know who his true master is. Let him experience the fullness of your song.
The owner had laughed at Harry. He had taunted Harry. You wanted to do me a favor? Harry thought to himself. You thought breaking my fiddle did the world a favor? You didn't think my music should be heard? He increased the speed of the song, giving up the words in favor of a new variation of the chorus. The magic responded by flooding through him. The owner reached out to grasp the unseen object. Not quite able to catch it, he leapt and stretched. His eyes widened as his smile stretched even wider. His feet moved so quickly that he stumbled and struck the wall. The audience also danced faster. Their expressions of joy turned into expressions of pain when moans and groans joined with the notes. Women tripped and fell, only to be trampled on by others. Men knocked one another sideways, their arms extended as they spun.
Feed their desires, fill them with my power.
The owner crumpled to the floor. He stretched out his arms. Laughter broke through his smile and clenched teeth, making his body heave. Tears ran down his cheeks. If Harry continued, the man would die.
His light grows dim. Let him have his time. Let him know what it means to be touched by another world.
No, Harry said. He wasn't there to kill anyone. He wasn't a murderer. He only wanted to make the owner experience the power of the magic fiddle, hear what Harry could do, and acknowledge his abilities, and to make him pay for what was owed. Harry had not eaten in 2 days. Though the magic of the fiddle chased the hunger away, he needed food. The stumbling dancers tripped over fallen bodies and spun into one another. The music killed them, too. If Harry didn't stop, every man and woman would die.
Play the music. Keep going. You command the greatest musical power ever known. Think of the legacy this will create. Word will spread, and they will fear your songs, even as they desire to hear them.
Harry had to stop playing. He had to take control of the fiddle and the music. A tear ran down his cheek. What would old Monty have thought of him? Stealing a fairy fiddle? Thinking he could control the magic? The old musician's look of sadness and disappointment filled Harry's mind, forcing him to play softer, pulling back the flow of the magic. His arm twitched when the fiddle tried to take control. Squeaky notes filled the air, making the people howl.
This is your dream. Keep going. Keep playing. We will be the greatest pair the lands have known. You can spread our music far and wide.
No, Harry said again, and louder.
Let me guide you. Let me be your compass. Do not think, do not question. Merely trust, and all will be well.
To stop playing meant losing his connection to the magic. It meant losing his entrapment of the audience, the same ones who had laughed when he was tossed into the night. Old Monty's voice drowned the fiddles. Sometimes you won't be able to give an audience what they want. It won't be a reflection of your talent, young one, just a matter of a bad fit. Harry had been a bad fit for months. Now he would never have that problem. Instead, he had a different one. He looked at the pitiful, almost heartbreaking scene before him. People cried and moaned. Some twitched in response to his music. Others simply stared, like the owner, at a distant object. Harry forced his arms down, holding the fiddle and bow at his sides. The upright dancers suddenly stopped. They grasped at the air as the last note, the last bit of magic, slowly dissipated. Then they collapsed. The dance hall owner's weeping, broken and bitter, rose above all other sounds. He had curled himself into a ball. "What have I done?" Harry whispered. His dream had turned into a nightmare. He held the fiddle out and gazed upon its beauty.
Play me. Enjoy the power. Keep going. Why have you stopped? All will be right when you play me, when you release the power of the songs.
No, he whispered, then ran from the dance hall. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't my dream.
Turn back. Keep playing. This is your destiny. Look and see how they beg for more. They have been touched by true magic, and they want more. You can give it to them. You can be the one they adore, the one they want, the one they need.
Harry paused to look. A dozen people reached for him. Madness filled their eyes. Something other than music had touched them, and they wanted to feel it again. Harry fled into the night, running down the road that led back to the forest. He wanted to give the fiddle back to the fairy. What price are lyrics, stanzas, and riddles demanded by a magical fiddle, no more to be taunted, goaded, and teased, when day after day its powers are seized? A fiddle dreams of songs played loud, of audiences entranced in magical fairy sounds.
You are guaranteed a performance like no other. Listen to songs of pure ecstasy and delight. Be moved deeper than you have ever thought you could be moved. Do you want to dance?
The crowd answered with an enthusiastic yes.
Do you want to know what it's like to be lost in a song?
When they gave the same answer, the MC swept his black cane with the silver tip across the audience.
You can't imagine what that feeling is like, but I dare say you will before this night is over.
He held up a ticket lined in gold foil.
You are lucky to have received a ticket such as this for a once-in-a-lifetime performance. The ticket will be your reminder of what you will experience on those nights when you wonder if, by chance, you dreamed. The ticket will tell you it was real, it was wonderful, and you were so very lucky to have known an evening such as this."
Harry watched Tom from behind the red velvet curtains. He had hired him to not only act as an MC, but to also be a manager. In the years since Harry had taken possession of, or been possessed by, the fiddle, he understood more and more each day that it was the latter. His reputation had spread like a fire through kindling. Because he was highly sought after for performances, he needed help arranging his schedule and responding to requests. Dusty, run-down dance halls were fading memories. Those weren't the only changes to his situation. Every night he had a nice place to sleep. No longer did he need to find cover under the canopy of a tree when it rained. Food was plentiful, even if he had little interest in eating. The fairy magic made most of what he ate taste like grit and sawdust. Money was no longer a concern, though he never had time to spend it. The fiddle demanded he perform night after night. He refused only when he reached complete exhaustion. The fairy's instrument had altered him as surely as it altered those who attended his concerts. Whereas he first thought the magic was a blessing, he now knew it was a curse. It had turned his dream into a waking nightmare. If he ever saw the fairy lady, he would apologize for taking her instrument. He would throw the fiddle at her and flee, so he never had to deal with the cursed thing again. He shook his head. That was wishful thinking. He was too dependent on the magic and the feeling of life it gave. He couldn't willingly let go of it. Once he lost the fiddle, it would be his death. When that happened, the instrument would find another to use and consume. Only one thing needed to be done: destroy the fiddle before it destroyed him. The question was, could he stand against it, resist it, long enough to do so? Tom twirled his cane around his forearm, catching the light in flashes on the tip. He wore a black tuxedo with suede along the edges of the lapel and down the side of the pants. His top hat also had a suede stripe along the rim. If he appeared to raise the audience's expectations high, he did so only for the reason that he wouldn't be able to raise them high enough.
"A wonderful evening you will be part of, a wonderful celebration of music and how it touches our spirits awaits each of you."
He stopped and tipped his hat to a lady in the front row. It was the sign when he spotted an especially beautiful woman for whom Harry could play a special song. Tom resumed his pacing and twirling.
"Yes, a magical evening you will experience, a magical encounter you will have."
He stopped in the center of the stage.
"Are you ready to meet your composer, your maestro, your guide through a sensory journey?"
When the crowd yelled in anticipation, the man held a hand to his ear, as if he hadn't heard them.
"Did you say you are?"
The crowd yelled louder, and Tom switched hands and ears.
"Are you sure?"
Harry took the cue to emerge from behind the curtains. He held his hands up, with the fiddle in his left one. He smiled at the crowd. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." The yells slowly settled. He took a deep breath to savor the moment.
"A moment made possible by my power. Never forget that I have graced you with this gift."
"We love you, Harry!" a lady yelled. Several others echoed the sentiment. Harry scanned the front row until his eyes lit on the lady Tom had signaled. She had large blue eyes, a slender face, and brown curly hair. Tom did well spotting her. A special song would be in her future. Harry placed the fiddle on his shoulder. The familiar sparks tingled where they struck his neck. He wasn't sure if he had grown accustomed to the effects of the magic or if he had built some sort of tolerance to it. Either way, he didn't see the world as clearly as he did in the early days. The glows around the people remained, along with the fires inside them. The brightness of everything, however, was much dimmer. Not even drawing on more of the magic restored it.
"Play, release my magic and let me consume their fires."
Harry brought the bow up, rested it on the strings, and paused. The fiddle had become more insistent in recent weeks, as if it was annoyed with his performances, and that despite the fact Harry had played to his largest audiences. 3,000 looked upon him, even at that moment. No one made a sound. Every person held his or her breath.
"Begin now."
Harry drew out one long note to let the magic permeate the air. He followed with another long note to give the magic time to spread to every nook and cranny in the theater, from the 40 rows on the bottom level to the 20 rows in the balcony. The size of the venue required a third note to make sure everyone was properly primed.
"You are delaying. Play. Let my power soar."
While Harry would have liked to delay with several more notes just to spite the fiddle, his very being craved the magic. Too long without it, and he became the same as a drunkard too long without his drink, complete with shivers and body aches. He gave the fiddle what it wanted when he transitioned into a slow, melancholy song, "The Way the Wind Blows." He had written the instrumental over the last 3 months after he realized he needed a better warm-up number, both for himself and his crowd. The song was meant to capture the melancholy feeling of early fall days when the summer begins to die and the cool night air promises the birth of winter. The magic flowed through him in a steady stream, nothing too taxing, but enough to lull the crowd into a sense of warmth and comfort. He finished the song with fading notes, which made each person lean forward, as the magic slowly faded like fog burning off in the morning sun. They had tasted the power just a little, and just enough for them to erupt in applause. Whistles of approval followed. Harry looked over the crowd. Thirst filled their eyes. Their mouths were set to beg for more. Rather than immediately giving it to them, he let the applause fade until silence filled the hall. The diminishing magic gave rise to shudders and gasps which rippled through the crowd.
"Play now."
"A young man of 20, Harry sang as he started The Red Rose, a familiar tavern song.
"Went about the town looking high and low,"
the crowd sang in reply.
"I am seeking a sweet young lady, whom I can woo and woe."
An audience participating in a song fed the fiddle, which responded by pouring more magic out. Harry sometimes thought an audience's singing attracted the fiddle, like blood attracted a ravenous wolf. He didn't mind the mutual bond, for it let them enhance the power without extra exertion on his part. Even though he had to play sillier songs, it was worth the effort. He paused for a split second before starting the chorus.
"A right handsome man he was, who sought a right beautiful lady."
Harry skipped across the stage.
"To woo and woe, to be a fool, to give his heart, to give his life."
Harry played louder, releasing more magic. Moved by the sudden power filling them, every person in the crowd stood. They clapped and stomped in time to the song. He stopped in front of the lady in the front row. A wink made her blush, even as she smiled and tried to hide behind a loose strand of hair.
"A young man of 20 found a sweet young lady whom he could woo and woe."
Harry moved down the stage.
"She was a right beautiful lady who made his heart skip and his heart pound."
He paused playing long enough to wiggle the bow at the audience. They responded with the chorus. Their voices grew louder with each line, and the fiddle took a stronger hold. Harry and the fiddle would have complete control by the end of the song. He promised himself, as he always did, to be a perfect gentleman that evening, even though the fiddle was always of a nasty temperament. The instrument neither understood nor cared that Harry had a reputation to nurture and protect. They struggled night after night, but Harry tried to limit scandalous shows to only those that were absolutely necessary. For instance, he had once robbed a crowd of their valuables in order to afford a wardrobe and to hire Tom. Sadly, the fiddle had won more than its share of battles. It made crowds kiss strangers. Others paid double for their tickets and sent several audiences running mad into the streets. It found a particular delight in the last one. Before he started the third verse, he ad-libbed the change from the chorus. The magic sent electric impulses through his arms and legs. Though its impact had lessened, Harry's senses were still heightened, enough for him to smell the lilac-scented perfume on a lady 10 rows away. He heard a man 20 rows out, huffing and puffing while stomping his foot, trying to keep up with the beat of the song. The acrid taste of ozone hung in the air, promising a coming storm. He thought that strange, since the sky had been clear when he entered the music hall. Distant thunder rumbled, while the wind whipped around the building. He finished the extra part and started the next verse. A young man of 20 fell in love with a sweet young lady whom he could woo and woe. He stood in the center of the stage and closed his eyes. She was a right beautiful lady who stole his heart and his purse. She made him pay the price for his devotion. He was a heartbroken young man who had sought a beautiful lady and found more than he dreamed. She filled him with the worst of emotion. A right broken man was he, the crowd sang with delight. Who found a right devious lady, Harry answered, to woo and woe. Harry spun, because he was a fool. Who gave his heart, he sat on the stage, and his life. The song ended. From under his brow, Harry watched the crowd. They leaned forward, grasping for the fading magic. Their expressions, with bulging eyes and jaws set in determination, showed how it left them hungry for more. There was no sound, no applause, no cheers, no whistles, only complete silence. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Harry slowly picked himself off the stage floor. He kept the bow tantalizingly close to the strings, promising another sound to fill them with a magic they had never known existed, and one they would never know again. You will play, you will not stop until I am satisfied. He drew the bow across the strings, letting a note fill the hall. The released magic made the audience relax. They rested on their heels rather than their toes. Harry played a melancholy song to give them a break from the faster pace. He still had hours to go, and he couldn't burn them out in the first few songs. Actually, he could burn them out. The fiddle would accept such a sacrifice, but Harry refused to kill. They are tiny things, little creatures of no value. Let them feed me. If they die, who will sing our praises? There will be more. My magic satisfies their innermost desires. No one will resist, not even you. The words hit Harry deep inside because they were true. The longer he played, the more he depended on the cursed instrument. What hope did he have of ever breaking its hold on him? Deep within, did he even want to? I am a blessing to all who hear me. Your melancholy song is giving you melancholy thoughts. Harry quickly transitioned into a song about a king who tried to tame his wild hare and never quite succeeded. The audience laughed like they had never laughed before. In the same way the magic made Harry more sensitive to his surroundings, so it made his audience more sensitive to emotions. They would pour everything they had into whichever feeling Harry evoked in the music. He moved to the side of the stage where the lady watched him. He smiled at her again, and she stepped toward the stage with an expectant look in her eyes. Whereas he had been unable to successfully court a lady before he found the fiddle, he could not get them to look past the magic now that he had it. Not a one of them liked him for who he was, only for what he could give them. He had met 100 different women in the course of his travels with the fairy fiddle. Each time he thought he had found someone with a special connection, he learned she only wanted to hear more music and feel more magic. Would the lady who looked up at him be the exception? Would she be the one whom he could love? I am the only one you love. I am all you need. Worry not about the lady. Worry only about your music. Play. Harry obeyed with The Long Road Home, a tune he had written several years ago. It began with a musical introduction intended to set the tone for a man's return home after 20 years.
You are wasting time. Your song will only make them cry. I need to feel their strength. I need to feed on their energy. Play a faster song."
Harry continued his own song, both in defiance of the fiddle and to make his mark with the audience. He believed the song had a certain power of its own. He had liked to hum the tune in his head when he walked down long, lonely paths and lanes. "On a summer's night in a distant land, I found myself wandering a dusty trail."
"Stop! Play something else."
"Time and again my thoughts turned to familiar faces, to familiar places, and to thoughts of childhood." Harry stood in the center of the stage. He closed his eyes. "The places that haunt your memory, the people you carry from day to day. I wandered a dusty trail with questions of who I had been and who I had become." The fiddle tried to withhold its magic, but it couldn't resist the pull of the notes. It might talk and threaten, but Harry knew its weakness was the songs themselves. Therein was the only means of control he had over the instrument.
"You will change the song now. If you don't, you will regret your willfulness."
The years were long, but the dreams of youth remained. I had journeyed far, but the child insisted. Had I changed? What had I grown into now? What waited at the end of the road, the beginning of the journey? The words not only filled the audience, but they touched Harry too. He had been a long time from his childhood home. Perhaps he should return to see if anything had changed. He could let them taste the magic.
"You will go where I command. Your home is too small to contain my growing hunger."
He played a musical interlude between the chorus and the next verse to set the tone for the man's growing anticipation of returning home. Amidst a peal of thunder outside, a strange sound made him open his eyes. The people on the front row had moved from their seats. The nails on their fingers scraped the stage floor as they tried to pull themselves up. They snarled at Harry, and such was their determination that they left bloody streaks from raw fingers. Harry continued the musical interlude and directed his notes to the people to drive them back. His effort made them more determined to climb. Their scratching and clawing intensified. Some pulled at those next to them to use them for leverage. Several disappeared beneath the trample of feet.
"You will do what I say. If you refuse, I will find another."
"There will not be another. You need me just as much as I need you." Harry slowed the song, which slowed the flow of magic. Still the people came at Harry. The fiddler motioned to Tom, who intercepted the first person up, a young man whose fingers bled. Tom ducked an awkward swing, then promptly knocked the man on the head with his cane.
"How many can you hold off? How many can you keep away before they overwhelm you? Either obey me, or you will be consumed by the very ones who adored you not 5 minutes past."
One thing Harry could do to stop the magic: stop the music. He dropped the hand with the bow to his side. Tom tripped a lady who had reached the floor of the stage. He backed up to hook an older man by the shoulder. He pulled that one into another lady who had just reached the top. The lady Tom had singled out earlier caught Harry's eye. She screamed when the music ended. She clawed at the stage floor, pulling herself up inch by inch, leaving more bloody streaks on the stage floor. Her beautiful face had contorted into an animal rage, with her mouth wide and her eyes narrowed to slits. Others' screams joined hers. The second and third rows followed the lead of the first. They too surged for the stage, crushing those in the front. Someone pulled on the lady's hair, forcing her back. She too disappeared under the crush of bodies.
"Play, and it will stop. Play, and you just might save them. Play what I want."
"And if I don't?"
"I will find another. See that one on the balcony about to jump? Perhaps she will be the new you. What if her music is better?"
To live without the magic and the music would be his death. What could Harry do? He raised the bow once more. He started a new song to soothe the savagery before him. The fiddle laughed. The mass of humanity moving toward him stopped when the magic filled them. The looks of anger turned to looks of pleasure, and the people settled. Harry looked across the balcony. The lady who had prepared to leap from the balcony danced on the ledge. She spun as the magic took hold. Harry's dream had become a darker nightmare. The concert hall shook when another peal of thunder rumbled through the night. A barrage of rain pounded the ceiling. One person to the right of the dancing lady caught Harry's eye. She sat in her chair, unmoved by the magic. He studied her closer. She looked familiar. Had he seen her at a previous performance? Had he... She leaned forward. Her white skin glowed, and her black hair soaked in the lights. Both highlighted her face, which was set with determination. The fairy from the clearing. Harry's eyes locked with hers. He wanted to apologize to her for taking the fiddle. He wanted to say he was sorry for letting it consume him. What if she didn't want to hear his apology?
A vile creature, she should not be here. Let my magic drive her away. Let it consume her.
Harry wondered why the fiddle's music no longer affected her. He transitioned his soothing melody into a quicker, lighter ditty that made everyone dance. When the notes failed to move the fairy, Harry played louder and quicker. Still, the fairy simply sat and watched.
If I cannot remove her, perhaps they will.
Those closest to her swarmed about her like angry bees attacking an intruder to their hive. She disappeared beneath a mass of bodies. Fists flew, and those on top tried to pull or push those between themselves and the fairy. Harry played quieter, keeping the magic flowing but not increasing it. She isn't here to kill me, she promised.
Fairies are not to be trusted. Your own songs tell you that. They are manipulative and deceitful.
The same way you are?
I have given you what you dreamed of. I have given you more than you imagined was possible.
The pile of bodies in the balcony shifted. It appeared to expand before those on top fell away. A solitary figure emerged as the fairy floated away from those who tried to harm her. Their hands slid off her like she was coated in oil. She kept her eye on Harry. He backed away, still playing.
She is coming for you. She will destroy you if you give her the chance. You cannot stand against the wrath of fairy magic.
I've resisted you, haven't I? Despite his words, Harry knew he didn't want to face the lady. The rain continued pounding the roof, thunder shook the building once more, and the fairy floated away from the mass of humanity, which shifted and roiled with her. She held her arms wide, all the while keeping her eyes locked on Harry's. He mouthed, "I'm sorry." She gave him a sad smile, as if she understood his predicament. Or did he misread her expression? Every person on the balcony converged on the spot just below the fairy. In the same way, those at the stage climbed over one another to reach Harry, so those in the balcony formed a human pyramid to reach the fairy. They spilled over the edge and fell on top of those on the bottom level when the fairy moved closer to the stage. "You can't stop her," Harry said. "We will have to face a day of reckoning. She is going to demand we answer for your wicked ways."
You were, and continued to be, a willing accomplice. What were you before I found you? What future did you have? You embraced my power and its possibilities. You have enjoyed the life I give your mortal frame.
Harry's shoulders slumped. He never wanted the scene before him. The fiddle was right, though, that he had too readily agreed to its demands. He had rejected old Monty's wisdom in favor of trying to salvage his dream. He had only wanted a little magic. Now he had been given more than he could handle. He changed the pace of the song to a more frantic one. Squeals of excitement rippled through ladies in the crowd, while many cheered the sudden outpouring of magic. Everyone danced, hopping up and down and spinning. Their bouncing kept pace with the rhythm of the song and created a regular pounding drum when their feet hit the floor. The fairy drifted over them all and motioned for Harry to meet her.
Play faster, play louder, she will not reach us.
Harry obeyed. He even screeched the strings, sending bolts of magic into the air. The audience responded by screaming and dancing faster. They slammed into one another as chaos filled the theater. The fairy continued floating toward Harry and the stage. She held her hands out, indicating she would not harm him.
"Do not listen to it any longer,"
she said, above the fury of the audience.
"We must leave. We must go where she cannot go. Find a place she cannot reach."
Harry took one step back, then hesitated. What if they talked? What would be the harm? She promised not to kill him.
"You will go now."
Tom grabbed Harry's arm.
"Sir, we'd best be leaving. I can't keep the entire audience off the stage."
He pointed to where the people once again scratched and clawed. They pushed each other down, and some even tried to jump, falling short and crushing those they landed on. Harry couldn't tell if they wanted him or if they were still after the fairy. With Tom leading the way, they ran backstage. Harry continued playing until they reached the rear door. They ran into the night, with the rain pounding, lightning flashing, and thunder rumbling. The fiddle lives with a dream of its own to find the perfect one to feed its soul. The struggle ensues for master and slave, as the songs enrapture both king and knave. A deadly war with stakes so great continues day after day to determine the world's fate. The king sat upon a throne made of gold, with red velvet pads for the seat and back, adorned with ivory buttons. On the arms were etched designs of eagles, ending in a carved head with the beak pointing out. The king wore crimson robes, with the white fur of the snow leopard lining the neck and sleeves. His beard had been trimmed straight along the bottom, with defined edges to give his face a square, intimidating appearance. Beside him sat his lady on a golden chair, on the back of which were two swans, whose heads touched at the top to form the shape of a heart. She wore a red dress that reached to her ankles, with a wide belt on which hung 4 knives.
"See, you are the most sought-after musician in all the lands. Your fame has spread to the hallowed halls of the royal court. Have I not given you all your desires? What is the gratitude I have received? Scorn and ridicule. Your days are numbered, mortal man. Your time draws to a close."
Harry bowed before the king, stretching his arms to either side. In his left hand he held the fiddle, and in his right he held the bow. He wore his finest clothes, ones far better than what he wore the night he came to possess the fiddle. His black pants had been tailored to fit him, and included a crisp crease down the front. His black shirt had been specially made too, with gold buttons. His black coat with the suede lapels and tails were of the finest craftsmanship. They testified to just how far he had risen. They also testified to just how far he had fallen. The clothes had been made 3 months prior. They had fit perfectly then, while now they were far looser than they should have been. His weight loss was due to his lack of eating, which he was well aware of, but what did food mean when he had the magic? It sustained him. It gave him the strength he needed to get through each day. More and more, it fed him and carried him, while it also demanded his life. Indeed, the 1.5 years since he had first experienced its power had taken its toll. The fiddle ate his life, day after day, until he was barely more than skin and bones. He sometimes had trouble distinguishing between dreams and reality. Too often, one blended with the other. Could he be certain he truly stood before the king? The fiddle had increased its insistence on finding someone to replace him. The attacks had grown more difficult to fend off, but Harry had managed thus far. The day was coming, however, when he would not be able to defeat a new suitor.
"You would play for us?"
the king asked. Harry stood straight and smiled, though doing so pained him. The audience only thought they knew what was about to happen. "A tune such as you have never heard, Your Majesty. I promise that you will be moved this evening in ways you never imagined, in ways only spoken of in whispers in your most distant dreams, the ones that float away like drifting smoke when you wake." The king's audience hall stretched long. On either side, the noblest of the nobility stood and watched. They were adorned in their finest clothing and jewelry. The ladies wore blue dresses with flowing skirts or red dresses with small bustles. The men wore black coats and white shirts with a cravat matching the color of their ladies' dress. Many wore hats. The ladies were wide-brimmed, while the men's were velvet-edged top hats. The gallery on the second floor was also packed with those who were curious about this most magical of musicians, though by their less fine clothing they were of a lower social class. Not that their standing mattered to Harry. He felt equal pity for them all. The fiddle was a monster unleashed in a world unable to check its power. It consumed with an insatiable thirst for more life, Harry's and whoever was cursed to be filled with its notes. He looked for the fairy. She had tracked him since that fateful night in the theater. He managed to elude her early on, but as the months grew longer, she anticipated his appearances. In a panic, Harry had ended his performances those first few times. When she made no move to stop him and continued to ask him to talk, he learned to continue, though the fiddle always forced Harry to leave before they spoke. The king waved Harry's comment away with a silk handkerchief.
I have heard many such claims through the years, Fiddler. Not a one of those stating such grandiose promises has lived up to his or her words.
Harry had to check to make sure he still stood. The magic had burned out the feeling in his legs, from his feet to his knees. Holding onto the fiddle kept him perfectly grounded, resulting in his rarely letting it out of his grasp.
What more do you need? I have carried you to the highest of heights. This will be your final conquest.
Is this a conquest? Harry asked the fiddle. To conquer is the desire of generals and kings. To challenge is for those who seek to rise above their rightful station in life. You would dare to call your challenge a conquest? On behalf of what army? At the behest of what king? Surely not me. Harry bit his tongue. He forgot no one else could hear the fiddle. He prepared to play. The electrical shocks against his bare skin no longer hurt. He had grown so numb to the sensation it was nothing more than an annoyance, like a fly buzzing around his head. This is not a challenge, O king. This is a guarantee that you will dance. The man gave Harry a short, mocking laugh. He leaned forward and jabbed his finger at Harry.
No one makes me dance. No one moves me from this throne. I am the conqueror. I am not a challenger.
He leaned back in his chair.
You should also know, man of great boasts, that I do not take lightly such words as you have spoken. Those who have made similar claims have done so on the threat of their death.
He waved to Harry.
I will take your words at the same value. If you fail, you boaster of greatness, I will have your head displayed in the courtyard for all to see and for all to mock.
Harry stared at the king. What do I get in return when I prove my words are no boasts, but are simple truths? He swayed from left to right. The bow rested on the strings, ready to release the torrent of pure ecstatic magic upon the hapless victims hanging onto the king's every word of his threat. The queen leaned over and whispered in the king's ear. He looked at the ceiling while he considered what she said. She sat straight in her chair, and he let the anticipation hang over the hall. Slowly, he nodded.
Yes, I believe my lady speaks well.
He leaned forward.
If you prove your words true, you mere man of music, then you may have whatever belongs to me, up to half my kingdom. You can even have my wife if you so desire.
The queen gave Harry a look of contempt, with a smirk and half-lidded eyes, not unlike the dance-hall owner and his henchman on the long-ago fateful night.
Had you listened to me, had you not defied me time and again, she would have been begging you to accept her as the gift. The entire kingdom would have been yours for the taking.
Harry didn't want the queen. Not that she wasn't beautiful, and not that he still missed having a lady by his side. He wanted more than anything else to destroy the fiddle and its curse. That was something not even the king could give him. He could have made a scene of accepting the king's challenge. He could have played to the audience to make them choose sides as to whom they thought should win the challenge. Despite their nobility, their wealth and power, within they were no different than all the audiences in all the concert and dance halls he had performed in. They all had the same desires. The only difference was they had the means to satisfy what they wanted. They had the influence to make sure they got whatever they directed their hearts toward. Now, they were about to experience something beyond their reach. There was no need to build them up. They only needed to know. Harry didn't try anything special for the occasion. He started the same way he did every night, by drawing the bow along the strings in one long note. The magic filled the note, which then filled the hall. He played another long note, letting its subtleness draw them in. The king sniffed and studied his fingernails in boredom. The queen gave Harry a smile as if to say she had heard such notes before and was not impressed. Harry looked only at the king. He watched the man's nostrils move in and out ever so slightly. The whiskers on his face twitched when he frowned. Harry paused. The entire room held its breath, save for the king and queen, who continued to look bored. Harry began The Wanderer's Tale, a song about a man looking for a home in a new land. Listen to the story of a man who knew much and knew little. Listen to the song of wandering hearts and troubled souls. The notes pumped the air with magic and made it so thick that no one could escape it. This is the tale of a man who left home to seek adventure. He traveled the road to new lands and strange places. Those in the audience clapped along to the song. Still, the king appeared unaffected by the magic. Harry knew why. The fiddle kept its magic from affecting the man. It was going to make sure Harry lost the bet and his life. It was going to make sure it found its way to the most talented court musician, one who could entrance the royal couple.
Your future is at an end. Enjoy these final moments. Let my power flow.
Walking far and long, whistling a merry song, the traveler set his sights on distant lights. He poured enough power into the notes to make the audience continue clapping. Many moved their feet in rhythm to the song and provided a steady beat in the same way every group on all the nights he had played. The sound once encouraged Harry to keep going. Now it filled him with sadness because it meant they had been fully drawn into the fiddle's evil. The traveler found a land filled with flowing rivers. The sounds of birds singing and people laughing drew him in. He entered a land filled with rows of buildings. The sights of golden streets and sparkling windows mesmerized him. Harry tried to direct the notes to the king and queen, but the fiddle continued to divert its power. Despite the monarchs watching their subjects enthusiastically embracing the power, they appeared bored and aloof. Harry shifted the tone of the song and played it with sharps. The change caught the fiddle by surprise. For an instant, its power wrapped around the royal couple. It tickled their souls and made them both sit straight. The audience stopped clapping and stomping. Instead, they swayed and shivered. The fiddle adjusted its power to deflect away from the monarchs, and the two settled back once more. The king suspiciously eyed Harry. He motioned for his guards to move closer. Harry tried to direct the magic to them, to force them back, but the fiddle shifted its power from them, too. He would not be thrown from the hall. He would not be bullied by the king and his henchmen. With a short bridge, Harry changed the song to a simple tune, a child's tune, The Wet Duck. It had a basic beat and repeated one phrase. The rain fell and the drops stuck, and the duck smelled 24 times. The audience didn't care what the song was. They laughed and joined in, which is what Harry wanted. It let the fiddle feed on their interaction while letting him slip some of the magic to the king and queen and their guards.
You will not defy me this day. You are entertaining the greatest court in your land. This night will be spoken of for generations, for it is the time when I, not the king, will conquer the human world.
While making sure I'm killed?
A small price to pay. Enjoy these moments, for your light grows dim.
Little remained for Harry to enjoy. The magic barely lit the world around him as it once had. He had so little feeling remaining in his body once the power flowed through him. He felt his heart beating and his chest moving up and down. He knew his arm and fingers moved enough to produce notes. Outside of those things, he was numb. The king motioned for the guards to take Harry.
"You are a bore."
The man suddenly sounded like the dance hall owner from long ago. Harry had to make sure a golden tooth didn't sparkle.
"There is nothing special about your music, and I won't listen to more of its nonsense."
The sound of a second fiddle rose above Harry's. It played a harmonious part with higher notes. The king stopped mid-motion. He looked about the room. Harry felt the introduction of new magic twining with that of his own. It chased away his numbness, reminding him of the thrill of how the magic first felt. His instrument appeared to be oblivious as Harry's song continued to feed it when the audience repeated the chorus for the 10th time. The king nodded his head, and the queen went so far as to wave her finger in the air like she conducted an orchestra. Harry looked around for the source of the second fiddle. He spotted the fairy lady standing just within the entrance to the hall. She played Harry's old fiddle. The sight of old Monty's instrument, even in its magically repaired state, brought a tear to Harry's eye. The old man had been correct in saying his fiddle would be played in the finest court in the world. He just didn't know of the journey required to make it happen. He walked down the aisle to where the fairy played. She had her eyes closed as she focused on playing notes to match his own. The audience had moved into the walkway, but they parted for Harry. They danced and sang along with the song.
"What are you doing? What is—"
The sudden desire to change songs took hold of Harry. He resisted and focused on the next note and the next one in the silly song.
"Stop this! I will not allow it! I will not let you take me from this moment! You will not deny me this victory!"
A note faltered, making the audience gasp. Harry continued moving the bow, but his fingers played notes differently than what he wanted. He stared at them and forced one down for an A, then another down for a C.
"You will play what I need. You will consume them. You will—" "She is here!"
Harry changed the song to An Evening Rain, an instrumental meant to evoke feelings of nature unleashed. It had 4 movements with a bridge between each. The first movement featured a strong wind making its way across a land full of trees and canyons, which then gave way to open prairies where the wind could run freely and with whatever abandon it felt. The audience stopped dancing in order to sway with the musical breeze. They jerked when the wind struck a tree and slowed. They stumbled forward when it broke free and swept into a canyon where eddies of wind twirled and swirled. The people did the same, spreading their arms. It took a few minutes for the fairy to adjust her notes to match Harry's. Even then, she wasn't familiar with the tune and struggled to make a decent harmony.
"The deal," the king said, "was that your magic would entrance me, not some others."
The fairy stopped next to Harry. Her notes went flat and pounded at the king. Harry's fiddle forced his song to go sharp to counter the fairy's. Magic flowed. Magic attacked. "I'm sorry," Harry said above the cacophony. "I'm sorry for taking your fiddle." The fairy leaned forward and played harder, faster. She pushed her notes to the king and queen, demanding that her power break through the barrier of Harry's fiddle. When she failed, she slowed her song.
"Music man, I do not blame you for what has happened."
Harry had expected a rebuke, or at the very least, a war of music to make him know her anger. What do you mean?"
"Stop talking. Focus on playing."
"Seize the fiddlers,"
the king said. He stood on the edge of his dais and pointed his finger at Harry.
"Take them to the dungeons."
"You couldn't resist the temptation to take my fiddle,"
the fairy said.
"You couldn't possibly have resisted the power and the control it exerted over you. The fiddle is fairy magic, remember? It is not meant for humans." "Humans are far easier to control. They exist to make sure I conquer, and conquer I will this night. After this, the fairy realm will be mine." I don't blame you, Music Man. It was my carelessness that caused my fiddle to be unleashed into your world. I was too blind to my own sorrow to control myself."
She played an entirely different song, one which Harry had never heard. She made a run of sharps, followed by a run of flats.
"I am not here to hurt you, Music Man. I am here to help. We will need to work together to trap my fiddle. Can you hold out against it long enough for me to prepare the magic?" "You will be silent, fool. Speak no more. Only play and play and play."
Harry bit his lower lip as his song changed to what the fiddle wanted. His fingers moved on their own. His bow moved likewise. "I want to give it back," he took a deep breath, "but I can't."
"I know, Music Man."
"Grab them!"
the king yelled. The guards turned down the aisle. They held their pikes out, using them to part the crowd.
"It needs to be destroyed, not trapped,"
Harry said. His jaw clamped shut, and he could say nothing else.
"It cannot be destroyed."
Beads of sweat formed on the fairy's head.
"It needs to be trapped in a spell of its own creation."
"It will know. It can read my mind."
"Not if there is a greater desire in you. Trust me, Music Man."
Harry dropped to his knees. He continued playing as the fiddle took control. The fairy grabbed his bow arm and jerked him back. The music ended, along with the magic. The people stumbled in sudden shock. They ran into the guards. Some fell in the way, slowing their progress. The fairy pulled Harry to the doors.
"Meet me at the dance hall closest to the clearing where we met. 1 week from now, we must work to bind the fiddle to itself."
She pulled him up so he could look in her eyes.
"This will mean you will be trapped too, Music Man. There will be no way out. Your story, your song, will end like all human songs about fairies, with tragedy and sadness."
"Will it mean the fiddle will never be possessed by another?"
"It will."
"Catch the fiddler! 10,000 crowns to the first person to capture him!"
The king's voice carried through the hall.
20,000 if you just bring me his head."
"Will you do this, Music Man? Will you meet me?"
"Yes," he said. 1 week."
The fairy lifted her hand high, and a bright light emanated from it. It filled the hall to the point that no one could look at it.
"Then go, Music Man. Go, and speed be with you."
She pushed him out the door and into the evening. The light stretched Harry's silhouette across the entrance hall. His shadow was as crooked as those of the trees on the night he first possessed the fairy fiddle. He asked himself what he had become. Could he really put an end to the madness? Could he fight the fiddle another week?
"You will return to the hall. You will go no further. You, a mere human, will not deny me this prize."
Harry wished he could throw the fiddle down, but his hand gripped it so tight his knuckles ached. He ran down the foyer, forcing his legs to move. The light behind him grew even brighter. The king's voice followed Harry.
"Half my kingdom for his life!"
Life is like a sweeping and fleeting mist. Still the fairy fiddle always persists, driving, demanding, and consuming, never satisfied, always yearning. A dreamer dreams, life slips away, as the music crescendos, an audience swings and sways.
A hidey-ho, a hidey-dee, everyone circle and round you go.
Men and women, boys and girls, all joined hands as they circled the dance floor. Laughter, giggles, feet a-flying, faster, faster, even faster they spun. In their midst arose the song of fiddle both loud and strong. Notes filled the hall and wove a tapestry of heart-pounding, hand-clapping rhythms that tickled the souls of all. Casting the spell was a man whose arm appeared as a blur while he worked his bow for one final performance. His frame had wasted away to almost nothing. His body was completely numb from the magic. He barely knew his own mind. What he did know was that he had reached the end. His name had once been Harry. He had once dreamt of playing a fiddle for an appreciative audience, of traveling the world. He had hoped to find a special lady along the way, someone who could share in his life's adventure. Sadly, Something had happened along the way. The man knew his fiddle was to blame. He had battled it for months upon months, culminating in the last few days. The fiddle had been angry after the royal court. Had it been real? The increased intensity of the struggle pushed him beyond his limits. He had promised, however, and he would hold on, just a little longer. A tangled mass of light brown hair fell over the fiddler's eyes, and he jerked his head back to clear it out of the way. He grinned at a young lady with white skin, black hair, and red lips. He had seen her at least thrice in the last week. From the first time, he had taken note of the way her beauty complemented the richness of the night. She reminded him, because of her white skin, of someone he once knew. He laughed at the desires she stirred, and he raised the song an octave. "A-hi-diddle-do, a-hi-diddle-da, in and out, young and old," the fiddler crooned. The circle of dancers moved toward their center, with more laughs and giggles, all the time circling around. When they could go no further, they pushed away in a widening way. With arms and hands stretched, they held on tight. Grips slipped, and feet flew. Dancers spilled onto those seated about, while the ones still standing moved in again. All the while, the fiddler danced a private dance in and among the spell-struck, his movements a harmony to their melody of grace. He wove his magic with a tapestry of notes. He winked at the lady of ethereal beauty. She smiled at him and clapped harder. Did he see a twinkle in her eye? His heart leapt above the crowd, and his music soared. 3 dancers tripped over their own feet and fell, laughing as others pulled them away. Those remaining moved as one, trapped by the music's determination, trapped by its desires. They flew out again, and 4 more crashed into the spectators. The circle closed to 7, 5 women and 2 men. The fiddler's arm burned and begged for rest, but he had to see the song to the end. He could know no rest and show no weakness. The instrument demanded nothing less. As he captured his audience, so did the fiddle, making him a prisoner of notes and melodies. He lost himself to the song and the clapping of hands and the pounding of feet. A slender lady stumbled like a drunk out of the circle. 2 would-be suitors swept her out of the way. She smiled at their incessant chatter.
"You tease, you tarry, I will not tolerate more delays, and playing what you please."
The fiddler spun and stepped his way next to the lady of his growing desire. He grinned like a foolish boy gazing upon his first love. White eyes fluttered at him like butterflies on a summer morning. She blushed and nodded to the dancers. Only a man and woman now remained. They held hands as they faced each other, determination etched on their faces. They spun a circle so tight that their heads fell back. The fiddler changed the tone of the song to that of a storm lurking on the sea's horizon. Waters foamed with rage and threw themselves against a rocky shore as a tempest wind urged the pair onward. The dancers spun their way around the room, driven. The spectators urged them on. Dance, dance. The music consumed all. The dancers tossed each other into wider and wider circles. Each time they reached the edge of the floor, spectators pushed them back to the center. The fiddler raised the song to the last pitch, the final octave. He pushed numb muscles to play a chaotic flurry that threatened to rip the dancers from their hold. He made a key change to rhythm change and back again in the hopes of breaking their concentration. Still, they followed the song. 2 steps, a twirl. 1 step, a swirl. With the last notes calling out to the night, the dancers lost their grip and fell. The crowd surged forward to pick up and embrace the heroes of grace. The fiddler stood alone, his spell of enchantment and excitement disappearing with the music. He could only stare at the floor as his life slipped away. The scent of blackberry and apricot in the wine tickled his nose. He tasted the salt from the sweat of the dancers. He heard his heart beating. He still lived, if barely. He had to remember to breathe, 1 breath at a time. A hand touched his shoulder with just the lightest of breezes, like a feather against the cheek. He turned to find himself caught in the gaze of a blooming field in late spring. "A drink?" the woman asked, in a soprano tone one would expect from such a delicate frame. She offered a mug.
You will play, you will sing, you will give me your last and your best.
The man stared into her eyes and ignored the voice. The lady's beauty bound him in a spell stronger than the fiddle's magic. He had to remember to breathe.
Are you thirsty?
She asked, with an amused sparkle in those same eyes. The fiddler managed a smile as he took the drink. He wasn't thirsty. If anything, the thought of taking a drink made his stomach twist. Thank you. She looked to the floor, and her night-black hair spilled about her moon-white face. The fiddler felt a need to wrap her heart in his spells. Her presence spoke of a ballad. Her being spoke of poetry. He needed to know if she was the one. The call arose for another song. "Surely you all need a rest," the fiddler said, while looking into the woman's eyes. "The evening grows late, and you want more?" The crowd cheered and clapped.
You will drive them, no more delays. Feed them to me. Your final performance will be their final breaths. How about a slow one?
A lady asked.
But strike me through the heart, for I can never refuse a woman,"
the fiddler answered, while still looking at the one before him. She smiled as she turned away. He played a slow, melancholy tune, for he found it a sad thing to be deprived of the lady's company. Before he finished the opening stanzas, his heart's desire stepped up to him, her mouth close to his ear. The smell of a spring rain washed over him.
Save a song for me, music man. Save the last song, as we agreed.
She paused, and he felt the heat of her breath.
For later.
His heart pounded, and he had to calm himself to keep his focus on the music. He turned toward the woman, but found that she already danced with another. Disappointment, loss, and loneliness worked their way into the song. After all, was that not the way of his music?
You love your melancholy songs. You will play a song to make them burn bright. No more holding back. I will conquer this world, even if it means destroying it. The deaths are your fault for spoiling my plans with the king.
The man once felt the fiddle's rage deep within. However, it no longer mattered to him. The beautiful lady was all he concerned himself with. He wanted to see her happy. So he finished the tune with a subtle change in chord and time that let him jump into a happier jig. An older gentleman stomped his foot to the rhythm and whooped. A friend joined in, along with another, and another, and another, until a dozen fellows of gray hair clapped together. They moved onto the dance floor, taking with them women young enough to be their granddaughters. The fiddler's acquaintance was among the chosen. When she laughed, joy radiated from her. She moved across the floor in a motion of grace. Her feet barely touched the ground. Her hair swung about her shoulders. He watched, mesmerized by her movements. He no longer joined the dance, but played for her. He refused to listen to the voice in his head as he wove one song after another, losing his sense of time and place. He enjoyed watching her happiness. He took in the full measure of her fluid style, her rhythmic steps, and her slender frame. She wove a spell with her movements that mingled into the spell of his songs. Together they wove a tighter and tighter spell as the night progressed. It circled the fiddler and fiddle both, until the audience was forgotten. Only the beautiful lady remained. Close to midnight, something brushed the fiddler's cheek.
I bet those fingers can work real magic on a lady.
The one with pale skin and white eyes giggled in his ear, sending a tingle through his body. Low, burning lamps created a warm, fuzzy light across her slender form.
You promised me a song, music man. What say you play it now?
She unbuttoned the top button on her dress and gave the fiddler a look of longing.
You will play for her, you will pour yourself out, and I will feed.
With cheeks flush and head dizzy, with a newfound desire and certainty that he had found a kindred spirit, the fiddler rested the bow on the strings. What would you like to hear? A playful round, perhaps? Or a hot ditty? A song of longing? Or one of forgotten loves? He peered into the depths of her eyes. For what does your heart long? She freed another button.
"The question is what you desire and what you're willing to do to satisfy that thirst."
She motioned for him.
"Perhaps she is a worthy successor. Let me see if she deserves my great gift."
The fiddler stepped towards her, but she moved away just as quickly. He turned to reach her, but she sprang for the door. She paused long enough to say, "The song is of your choice. Make it a wise one, music man, for you have but one chance if you hope to catch me. Work your magic, and I might be yours." Her laughter disappeared amidst the rustle of trees which fought against a chill wind. The fiddler moved to the doorway. He peered into the darkness and the looming forest before his desire, or was it the fiddle's desire, that drove him into the night and the cold. A full moon lit his way as he ran after the lady. He entered the trees, but lost her trail. As he looked about, the cold air bit deep. He started to turn back, but she reappeared in the moon's radiance. She danced with the trees as they swayed to and fro to a song only she heard. He wasn't sure if she laughed or if the wind mocked him. He raced towards her and readied his instrument. Before he reached her, she moved again. He stumbled, then stopped to gather himself. He started to complain about roots and limbs and breaking arms and legs, but found that he had kicked her shoes. She watched from not more than 20 feet away. She spoke, but a sudden gust that sent the trees into a fury swept her words away.
"What?"
he yelled as she disappeared into thick trees.
"It matters not, fool. Play for her. Draw her in. Let her feel my magic. Let me take possession of her."
The fiddler moved between oaks older than his oldest songs. In the moonlight ahead, another clearing, the largest by far, awaited. A memory arose in the fiddler's mind of an old man he once considered a mentor and friend. The man rocked in a chair on the porch of an inn.
"The woods are dangerous at night, young one. The ancient forests are filled with all manner of creatures. Never let yourself be drawn to them."
Old Monty. The name gave rise to who the fiddler used to be, the young dreamer. He blinked in wonder at where he found himself. He thought perhaps he dreamed, or had he awakened from a dream? Either way, he had reached his end. A solitary object in the clearing caught his eye. Her dress fluttered from a low branch. He entered the circle of trees at midnight. He took it and felt its warmth. "Dream or not, I will play her a song she will never forget," he told the forest. "It will be my last." He released one long, low note that he hoped carried through the air, through the wind and through the trees. He followed it with another just as long and slightly higher. He gave her a song, then, but not just any tune. He gave one of his own creation, one that spoke of heart and soul. It had come to him in the moments of clarity over the last few days. He thought someone might have hummed it to him. A lady, perhaps? It could have been the very one he now played for.
"Your dreams have been satisfied. Now you will finish your duty to me. Play your final song."
After the first few loud notes, he played so softly and quietly that the wind calmed in order to listen. The fiddler swayed left and right with the changing tempo and mood. A soft pit-pot began to keep rhythm. Soft and subtle at first, it grew louder and closer. Pit-pat, tip-tap. She danced towards him, carrying a black fiddle. Pit-pat, pit-pat. Her feet caressed the grass as she moved to the center of the clearing. She spun, free and alive. Her hair flew about her head as she turned faster, and the night embraced her. The fiddler's sight became only her. His pulse quickened, and he ached with every spin, every step, and every sway. He changed the song's tempo, and she responded with a lighter step. She twirled about the clearing, and the moonlight radiated off her bare skin. He joined the white-eyed beauty, and they circled around the glade, in and out, left and right. She lifted her fiddle to her shoulder and played a counter-melody. Sprites swarmed the couple. They fluttered about in a circle, rushing here and there, but going nowhere. When the woman reached out, they flew hither-tither about her arms like golden bands. The fiddler paid them little heed, for he knew naught but his fiddle's demands. He let the fairy magic fill him. He no longer felt anything save for the music.
You are at an end. You have served your purpose.
The fiddler lost his sense of time, place, beginnings, and endings. Gone was his sense of self. Memories and dreams no longer mattered. All he wanted was to dance around the glade with the lady. No longer did the voice speak in his head. Instead, its magic wove in and through both songs, existing in the space between them. Together, human and fairy danced into eternity. In the forest glade where dreams find their end, human and fairy will forever lend the life required by the eternal spell, so fiddles can spin an infinite tale. A moonlit night, a forest bright, the lonely wanderer hears an endless song drifting near. Philip Ligon lives in North Alabama, where you can find a singing river, rockets that took men to the moon, big springs, and music inspired by rock and blues. It is an inspirational setting for stories of magical creatures and mechanical contraptions, where the imagination soars with possibilities. This has been a Jumpmaster Press production of The Fairy Fiddle by Philip Ligon, read by Rick McVey. Printing and production copyright 2023 by Jumpmaster Press.